Neil do the talking.
Hello again. It's me. A me who really wants to know what life is all about. A me who wants to find out if it all... Hello? Anyone there? Hello? Does anybody know who I am?
I'm the Urban Spaceman, baby, I've got speed. I've got everything I need. I'm the Urban Spaceman, baby, I can fly. I'm a supersonic guy. I don't need pleasure, I don't feel pain. If you were to knock me down, I'd just get up again. I'm the Urban Spaceman, baby, I'm making out. I'm all about.
I'm the Urban Spaceman, performed by the Bonzo Dog Band, produced by Paul McCartney, and written and sung by Neil Innes. The music and comedy legend of the Bonzos and the Ruttles, a towering talent, occasionally known as the seventh Python and regularly found with a duck on his head. His legacy of music and comedy is rich, inspiring and inspired. I'm Diane Morgan and I love Neil Innes, even though I did once upset him by telling him he looked bored on stage, but we'll get to that shortly. You're listening to Neil Innes' Dip My Brain in Joy on BBC Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. This is part one, bangs, belches, smut and smoke.
You were a schoolboy crush in a sort of way, not in an erotic way, don't pull that face.
And it happened so quickly, and we suddenly realised that we were perfect for each other. And he said, I think I ought to tell you I'm going bald. That was it.
Do you remember the make?
No, it was too ashamed of itself.
It's not art for art's sake, it's art for money's sake.
I just had a feeling that Neil was one of us.
I'm the Urban Spaceman, baby, here comes the twist. I don't exist.
Neil said of his work, Shakespeare wrote comedies as well as dramas, and I like to think I do that too. I'm just like Shakespeare, except with better songs. Neil's influence permeates modern comedy, and his back catalogue is as diverse and interesting as David Bowie's. David Bowie with puns, basically. Neil wrote and performed anarchic rock with the Bonzos. He penned and performed pitch-perfect pastiches of the Beatles for the Ruttles. He provided music for Monty Python. He had a prolific and diverse solo career with over 20 albums, including How Sweet to Be an Idiot, Innes Book of Records, and Recycled Vinyl Blues. And on top of being comedically and musically gifted, he was also a really nice man. A beautiful, kind, gentle soul, considered, absurd and delightful. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to celebrate his life, work and absurdist tendencies in a 3-hour collage of music, scraps and archive. There are interviews, performances and programmes, conversations with family, friends and fans, including his wife of over 50 years, Yvonne, Stephen Fry, Adrian Edmondson, Kevin Eldon, Rick Wakeman and Arthur Smith, bandmates Phil Jackson, Ken Thornton, John Halsey, better known to Ruttles fans as Barry Wham, and Python's Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin.
He did like things to be fun. We were all sat around. Neil would be something that he would like to turn it around a little bit, so that there was something strange and something weird and wonderful. He valued the time we all had. He loved the work he was doing. He worked very hard whenever he produced music of any kind. So although he was full of fun and all that, he wasn't sort of at all lazy or dismissive of effort. He liked effort to be put in. Neil didn't want to waste a moment.
Neil died on Sunday, 29th of December 2019. He was 75. At the time of his death, he was working on a new album and a project called Radio Noir, part audio memoir, part experimental work of art, part exploration of the human brain. And you'll hear some extracts and some unreleased songs throughout the programme that have never been broadcast. Given the richness of Neil's life and work, it's too big a job to tell his story on my own, so I'm going to let Neil do the talking.
Hello again. It's me. A me who really wants to know what life is all about. A me who wants to find out if it all really is what it is. And if it is, really share my understanding of what's what with all my fellow human beings. In other words, this me is a writer. But as a writer, I first have to ask myself, is this me the real me? I have imagined myself inside my own brain in order to find out.
Please do not leave memories unattended. Unattended memories will be removed without warning and may be damaged or destroyed.
Where was I? Oh yes. What you can hear in the background is a lot of ideas on their lunch break. We all have about 2 or 3 ideas or thoughts every second. And this noisy lot are just the ideas I've had in the past hour or so. This is where imagination comes in. Remember, we are inside a human brain. Once upon a time, I was a baby, then a child, a young man, a family man, and finally, an old man. We all get bigger and older, but none of us ever really go away. We are all trapped inside our bigger bodies, like Russian dolls. They keep on coming, and you begin to wonder if anyone is in charge of all this thinking. That's where I come in. I am the author, and I'm going to make it my business to get all these thoughts and ideas organized, tidied up, sorted out, even the weird ones. So, I was born on the 9th of December 1944. In a stately home that had been requisitioned by the government for use as a hospital. A German V1, so-called doodlebug, flying bomb had exploded in the grounds and prompted my mother to go into labour. Instinctively reluctant to enter this deeply uncertain and clearly dangerous world, some hours later I had to be persuaded with forceps. I was my mother's 3rd son. The 2nd was stillborn. My father was in the Royal Artillery, and soon after D-Day hit a French pothole on a borrowed motorbike and broke his leg. He was sent home. He was an army man, one of 5 children. At the age of 18 he had left his crowded Scottish home and his overbearing Freemason father and found himself in India, on the northwest frontier. I have photographs of him jumping a horse through a hoop of fire. He had to be a good rider. His job was to hang off his horse, holding a reel of telephone wire, and gallop between the guns and the observation post, 2 points of a triangle. The target was the 3rd. Part of me has always suspected that he borrowed the motorbike, knowing that he might fall off. He was no fool. His embryo survival instincts were clearly in good shape. Perhaps I wrong him either way. Had he not been sent home, I would not be here.
What really interests you? Does it really matter? Find out more on Matters of Interest, where interest matters.
I'm interested in when you started music.
The actor and fellow Neil fan Kevin Eldon talking to Neil in 2016.
What's your musical roots? When did you start playing an instrument?
I was about 7. We had a piano in the house where we were in Germany. My father was in the army, so we had a rather nice house with central heating.
Cool. Windows?
Windows, yeah. But I mean, nothing like what we'd left in post-war Britain. It was quite fantastic, and they decided I should have piano lessons, and I started off, doing all the 5-finger exercises and whatever. And I remember the day came when my left hand was supposed to do something different to my right hand, and 7 years old, still as arrogant, I said, "This is impossible." He was a nice, very gentle-spoken German piano teacher. He said, "Well, I think you observe what I am doing. My left hand is playing something different from the right hand." And I knew I was wrong.
Right.
So it kind of triggered me to sort of apply myself. The next few years, I was playing Chopin polonaises and doing a bit of a wunderkind, classical, basically. Yeah. But when I was 14, I thought, who am I working for? Every time I learn a piece, I get given a harder one. So I bought a guitar for 30 shillings.
Remember the make?
No, it was too ashamed of itself. It was so awful that the strings were so far from the fretboard.
You had to take a taxi.
That's the sort of thing. It was more like an egg slicer.
Yes.
But when I've met someone who got a Hofner, this is easy. But I still today play with a thumb. In a Richie Havens way, rather than bar, because I just couldn't have the strength to...
That's the advantage of starting off on a poor quality instrument. When you actually finally get your hands on a good one...
It can only get better.
It can only get better, yeah. So you really were backed up nicely with the classical stuff. You were technically there by the time you were in your mid-teens.
Yeah, no, I mean, I learned more about composition by playing off chord charts, which I'd never seen before. I used to do the bunches of grapes and things on the score.
Yeah.
But if it just said B flat, E flat, B flat, F, I learnt more about composition.
Yeah.
Just playing off the chords, because you invert, the different inversions of the chords. There's usually 3 notes in a chord. It can be an F on the bottom if it's a B flat, or a B flat on the bottom.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was a revelation to me. But I'm with Duke Ellington in the 2 kinds of music, good and bad. Any kind of music, if it lit me up, whatever, if it was good, So, yeah, I wasn't a purist. It was the silliness of the songs that got to me. Because part of the thing was I got very emotionally involved with the awfulness of the First World War. I've got a 4-year-old brain, probably, It's not fair. This is wrong, And so that kind of, made me look into it a bit more. And I found out that just almost as many people died of the flu after the First World War. And then, in 1928, the Great Depression. So it kind of linked. It amazed me that so many funny songs could come out of the hardship of a World War and then a pandemic. Because, at the end of the day, you have to get on with it, don't you? And so the people in the middle of all this hardship, and goodness knows what, soup kitchens and Frank Capra movies, depressing, there was all this silly stuff. And so I thought, well, that was kind of enlightening in a way and inspiring in a way, but at the same time, the sense of the awfulness, because as a child I'd seen where we lived in Germany in the Harz Mountains. In the morning you could get up and you could see refugees coming across from eastern Germany, soaking wet with blankets. Then you would say, well, who are these people, And they're fleeing the communist East. And also my father, whether he was right or wrong, but he showed us when we were boys, my brother and I, we saw footage of the concentration camps.
Right.
Gave you a kind of seriousness. It wasn't all funny, but that probably made me celebrate humour even more.
Had you always been interested in comedy anyway? Were you into the Goons when they were...
Yeah, absolutely. No television while we were there, but we had Journey into Space and, of course, the Goon Show. And I've always said about the Goons, it's like the pen is mightier than the budget. You can go anywhere with that imagination, and Spike's imagination was one, and the stupidity of, oh, the sun is hot, well, don't touch it. I mean, that's, what a complex bunch we are. We feel the misery and we have to laugh.
That's it. Well, it's one way of surviving. The sound element of humour being able to go anywhere. There's a little parallel there, isn't there, with the stuff with the Goons, where you could have these ridiculous things happening because he drew a picture with the script.
Yeah.
Same with a lot of Bonzo songs with sound effects and what you did with the lyrics. You took, I mean, something like "We Are Normal." I mean, that's a sort of Bruegel painting.
I know. We had, Viv had this idea of drawing a graph.
Yeah.
It starts off with this slime on the left and turns into this whatever, and then something else happens here, and sort of a bit of military stuff happens there. It was just kind of an evolution, of humanity in how many minutes it was. But we discovered stereo, so the waves breaking. That's the other thing you don't really realise when you just play the record. When you're listening to the multi-track coming through, you hear so much more.
You think you're normal? That's quite normal.
I was letting Kevin Eldon chat to Neil about his early life, but the conversation has meandered round to the Bonzo Dog Band, so I suppose we should talk about them now. In the bleak mid-1960s, a group of absurd young men from different art schools in London came together by chance to mutilate the trad jazz movement of the 1920s, to subvert the new wave of psychedelic pop, and to nurture a quite deliberate misunderstanding of anarchy. They are and were Neil Innes, Vivian Stanshall, Legs Larry Smith, Roger Ruskin Spear, Vernon Dudley Bohey Noel, Sam Spoons and Rodney Slater.
Hello, I'm Vivian Stanshall, and We Are Normal. That was the first number, which gave you some idea of the corking fun to follow. Our next number is about human relationships.
Rodney Desborough Slater.
Viv was a soulmate in as much as he liked the same sort of clothes that I did at that time.
Yeah.
And none of us would fit into the recognised tribes of behaviour or youth. And in wanting to be different, you had to actually go beyond the already sort of commercialised being an adolescent or being a young person and resisting buying what was on sale for you, which some old man had designed. And, I mean, it's like all those Cliff Richard movies, really, wasn't it? All written by old people who were still running the world.
And newsreels were done by very posh people.
That's it, yes, they always spoke in a very nice accent.
The British ingenuity is never at a loss when it comes to humorous hobbies. Once you've applied your body paint, what more natural than a head ballet, as performed by the Bonzo Dog Band, who are much more than a pop group whose heads are quite easily turned. They're a pop group that specialise in gags rather than gimmicks, but as you'll see later, it's more than a question of shaking their heads at convention. Sophisticated youth has taken the Bonzos up in a big way, though some of us might think they're just head cases.
People got old much quicker then.
Terry Gilliam.
When they reached maturity, they're now proper people, they speak properly, and they dress properly, they go to work, and the way life should be.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't, because we came along.
I didn't see what we could change in those days, but you had to try to change it, because it was pretty dour, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, our parents had been through a Second World War.
Yeah.
Our mums all thought it was really chic to have a headscarf tied like the Queen. And in the early days, we were growing up, weren't we?
Indeed we were, yes, we knew very little.
The band sort of fell in our laps, didn't it? It wasn't as though we wanted a career in show business, but we were having such a good time.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a great time to be young.
I think it was.
There were mods and rockers.
Mods and rockers.
And we sort of cut our own thing by going to Alfie Kemp Can Fit Anybody.
That's right.
For these double-breasted suits and the two-tone shoes.
Yeah.
And the competition for the worst tie. We found some stinkers, didn't we?
We did indeed, yeah. I still got some of them.
I was quite seriously keen on Dada
Yeah.
because I'd actually got quite worked up about the First World War being so awful, the mechanised slaughter.
That's right.
And then when you got Max Ernst coming out in 1919, everything that had been beautiful and true had been thrown into abyss. 25 years after that colossal kind of carnage, you had the Second World War, even more people killed. Clearly no one is in charge that should be in charge.
I really miss that period that the world turned upside down. The economic power of the youth suddenly changed it all. Yeah. People were trying to discover new things. They were suddenly looking at the world with very different eyes. It's like, you can do that, you can do that. And I thought we'd opened all the doors. And then somewhere, in the 80s, it all started closing up a bit again. And we kind of did it, or we allowed it to happen. The backing group comes in perfectly on that. Why don't we just fix the mess we're in? But I think we're very good at rebuilding things once we've gone off the cliff. And so we're going to have to go off the cliff.
We've had a charmed life.
Neil's wife of over 50 years, Yvonne.
We met at college, and how we met was quite funny because the Bonzos played in Goldsmiths College. And the first time we met, we just danced to each, and I was looking at somebody else that I quite liked, and he was looking at somebody he quite liked. And so we just parted. And it was about a year and a half till we came together again. First date he asked me on, he said, come and see the Bonzos at a pub in London. Bird in hand it was. And we'd only just really met. And we were going up in the train and he said, I think I ought to tell you I'm going bald. And I thought, there we were in the 60s. With hair was the only thing you had to have. And that really got me that time because I couldn't believe anyone would say that. And he didn't look like he was going bald either, And I thought that was so honest. And that's one of Neil's biggest traits, was always his honesty. And it happened so quickly. And we suddenly realised that we were perfect for each other. And we just went and got married in Greenwich Church. But when we got married, I was in black because I was total hippie in those days. But then the Bonzos were behind us in the registry office. And we couldn't keep a straight face. And we were saying our vows, but desperately trying not to laugh. And then we all piled into the local pub. And then we went to Ilford. They had a gig at Ilford, and that was on our wedding night. The most amazing thing was going in, it was the Bonzos headlining, but they were headlining over this very old man and his wife. And the old man, dressed in little briefs, and he had knobbly legs, and he was quite old. And he was swinging his wife around, and she was almost hitting the floor. And, it was just such a surreal day, the whole thing.
And then we all fly to see the clouds go rolling by. And then the sun comes shining through. Oh, my love, I love you.
And Neil was very good at living in the present tense. He was here and now. He wasn't somewhere else. Or he didn't hark back to history unless it was necessary. So, and that was always really nice because a lot of us spend our time worrying about what's going to happen when I go and meet him tomorrow. Or, I should have said that when I did that interview or something. But he never, ever thought that. It was as it was at the time, and that was it. That was quite relaxing to live with.
In November 2010, Neil looked back on his childhood with Janice Forsyth on Radio Scotland's Laughed Off the Page.
Now, your father was a Scot.
He was.
And I think, as well as your father being an important figure in your life, your Scottish granny, I think, was very important in your early life, was she not?
Oh, I have such a strong memory. I couldn't have been more than 3, barely able to talk. And I got bored with the grown-ups sitting around when we went to visit her up in Cullen in Banffshire. And I took exception to the colour of the woodwork, and I wanted to paint it a different colour. And my mother said, oh, don't be silly, of course you can't. And my granny said, of course you can. And she went and got me a tin of water and a paintbrush, and I sat there for the next hour happily painting the woodwork with water.
So that's one of your earliest memories?
Yes, definitely one of my earliest memories. And when I was older, I came back to see her when she was 98, still sharp as a button.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Gosh, how lovely. And you spent part of your childhood in Germany because your father was in the British Army on the Rhine,
That's
wasn't
right,
he?
yeah.
Do you have clear memories of that time? Was that odd, splitting time between here and there?
I found it very odd because, I knew there'd been a war, but all these Germans I kept meeting were sort of rather nice and they kept giving me cake, So I sort of realised that there was more to this than meets the eye.
Now, presumably humour was emerging from you even at a tender age, but what about the artistic side of you and indeed the musical side of you? Were you taking piano lessons as a child?
Yes, I got piano lessons, but I think I owe a bit to my father as well, because he used to actually play the guitar a bit, and he used to sing terrible songs. I mean, the wonderful kind of terrible songs, I think they're beloved by, Scots in a way, the tragedy songs, like, there's a bridle hanging on the wall, it's a dead horse song, and don't go down in the mine, Daddy, there's plenty of coal in the bin, this kind of thing.
Your dad sounded like an early Billy Connolly now to me.
Well, he made us laugh at bedtime,
And every child in any circumstances accepts that as being normal. Looking back, you could think that your childhood, because of your father's job, it was a fairly disruptive experience. Do you think it was? Were you able to build up friendships, for example, with other children in Germany?
Yes, although, I think if I count them all up, I went to about 12 different schools.
Right.
So you do get used to sort of gravitating towards people who are the same mindset and ignoring those who, are not. I was never one for ball sports, I'm hopeless. But I ended up rowing and running. But I've had good friends, throughout the school time and throughout the college years. You birds of a feather flock together, I think.
Indeed. Well, that seems to be the story of your career in a sense. We think about the various groups that you have worked with. And back in the UK, you went to art school. And I guess first came to prominence in the early 60s as a member of the Bonzo Dog Band. Although originally the band was not called that. It was the Bonzo Dog Band, wasn't it? In keeping with the whole art thing.
I know, it's art students again.
Yes, of course.
They understand what Dada is. It's a turn-of-the-century anti-art movement.
You're listening to Neil Innes' Dip My Brain in Joy on BBC Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. And I'm your host, Diane Morgan. And we can't have a celebration of the life and work of Neil Innes without getting our hands dirty by delving into the art world. Here's Neil talking to Python's most visual member, Terry Gilliam.
There are moments when suddenly things blossom. There are moments when it just springs out because it's been so hard and horrible. So humanity breathes a kind of, we survived. Isn't it wonderful? This is fantastic. And then you start looking around and you start enjoying yourself. And while all the nice people, the bright people, the people that care, the people with heart are busy enjoying what life can give us, they're the miserable little bastards back there thinking, I can make a buck off this. I can make $2 off it. And I can just make money off of money. I don't have to make anything anymore. Right. I can just use money. I'll make money with money.
And that's the one who dies with the most wins.
Yeah. It's not art for art's sake. It's art for money's sake.
Dada, Café Voltaire. It started after 2 years into the First World War. We got to re-examine everything, that kind of thing, in a coffee bar. No, we're going to do this. So, we'll draw a moustache on the Mona Lisa. Yeah. We'll exhibit a urinal. Yeah. I can see how they start off with the best intentions.
But it's a good intention. It shakes everything up. It points the finger saying, you realize this is art now. We're redefining art.
Yes.
But then when it becomes 100 years later and people are just repeating the same joke, come on, and getting paid fortunes for it, give me a break. It's not good enough. What does this have to do with the Bonzos?
Well, art school band. Well, you were talking earlier about the learn to draw bit. My happiest days at art school, really, were initially when I went at 16 to Norwich Art School. Good. And they had old methods. You had to draw Roman lettering. And when you drew them, you had to make sure the spaces in between were just as good as the spaces of the letter. Then you had to get a brush and paint them carefully. And it taught you.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you got into stuff like basic design, hang on, I better find a band.
Neil could have gone into art or he could have gone into music.
Yvonne Inez.
The art school wanted him to go into art because his art show was unlike anybody else's. Everyone had paintings or sculptures or something. Well, Neil had things like revolving art on a turntable. And the other thing he did was to paint tailors' dummies beautifully, so they were absolutely like women. He could almost touch them. And one very well-known art critic bought the tailors' dummies. And so the college was so impressed, they thought, well, he has to go into art. But the Bonzo pool was greater.
Here's Michael Palin.
I mean, just some of the things I liked about Neil was he loved Belgium. And, you know, Belgium was sort of considered, I think I wrote a song called Finland, 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 the country I most want to be. Your mountains so lofty, your treetops so tall. Much better than Belgium for going abroad. I should have rehearsed that.
My brother makes the noises for the talking.
And Belgium also got a bit of stick in a Python sketch called Prejudice, where it's an awful, awful man sort of whipped up prejudice. Actually, it's rather similar to certain people around today. So, you know, you could win by sending in the nastiest, most prejudicial comment about another country. And miserable fat Belgian bastards was the winner. I have to say, I met a Belgian later, and I was became good friends. And I said, I'm so embarrassed about the sketch. You know, he said, no, but you are right. We are. Neil saw through that. Neil liked the Belgians. He liked their surreal quality. He liked the fact it wasn't one of the big sort of aggressive countries. Because Neil was certainly not an aggressive man at all. He was far more sort of understanding and ironic, and I mean, he loved the surreal.
When I made Belgium my hobby, and all the surrealists came from there.
Yep.
Yvonne and I went to Brussels, had a look around, and the Flemish School of Painting is wonderful.
I know.
You know, because the triptych is there, but you've got all these kind of religious things, and you've got merchants coming up, putting bags of gold into the praying priest with one hand in the praying position, the other one with his hand out to take the bag of gold.
But that's why Bruegel and Bosch were my favorite painters. They were storytellers.
Yes.
And they were satirists.
Yes.
Of all the painters, they were the ones that really, because they had senses of humor.
Yeah.
They understood the frailty of humanity.
Did.
They undermined the church, the state, everything. They were smart.
But what has this got to do with My Brother Makes the Noises for the Talkies?
What? A famous Bonzo Dog Band song.
I'm
more interested in Can Blue Men Sing the Whites?
All right.
I love that. Or My Pink Half of the Drain Pipe. These are the important statements. I love My Pink Half of the Drain Pipe. It says everything about England at that time, not about America or France. It's about that.
From out of land will win a prize, won't that be nice? And by the way, how's your wife? Your holidays was spent in Spain. You went by train, you'll go again.
Have you seen me bullfight poster on the wall? Do you know the happy memory it recalls? It's a photograph of me and my son Ted. That's me cousin with his hanky on his head. We booked in at our hotel just after 2 and met a family from Bradford that we knew.
Terry Gilliam again.
Well, this has always worried me about comedy. Any of the things that you and I have done, it sort of takes the pressure off because it's a kind of a release that we can laugh. And I've always worried about that.
Yeah.
Rather than letting people get so angry, let them get so angry that they actually go out and do something, we give them release by letting them laugh at the futility, the stupidity of the world. And maybe we release the silliness that's out there now that the world has become.
And diffuse the righteous anger.
Yes.
My Pink Half of the Drain Pipe, it's on the way to sort of saying, look how we are.
Yeah.
But in doing that, all you've done is sort of say, there's a problem.
Ministry of Silly Walks. Say how silly all this is, but it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't fix it.
No.
On one hand, I've always felt that one has to do what the Bonzos did, what did on Python, encourage the thinkers to think.
Also the sense of not being alone.
Everybody's living in frustration and impotence. And then along comes comedy, and they realize they're not alone.
Stephen Fry.
I wonder if I didn't love Bonzos because I didn't have the same thing about girls that all my friends had, so they liked the Rolling Stones. It's all about girls, getting girls, being with girls. Something about squeeze your lemon till the juice runs down my leg. It's all quite erotic and dirty, and whereas you weren't. I didn't feel that you spoke to a lonely teenage heart, and I was relieved as a result of it. Donny Osmond could do that. Yes, you were playing with ideas, being funny, and that to me was a much more valuable role.
But I think what we did by accident rather than design was actually allow our childish playtime thing to come through, because everybody is like a Russian doll, really. You are a child and a toddler.
I'm a wobbly jelly, you're a pink blancmange.
Exactly, but these people don't go away.
No, that's right. Your minds were like attics, suburban attics, filled with stuff from the Victorian age and the Edwardian age and the austerity war age, all, and the jazz age, all sort of
but
junked
you can't
together.
Take credit for it.
You've got to be the one to sort it out, to make the collage.
You could argue the same with Python. The chemistry of the group is much bigger than any single person.
Yeah.
And the chemistry of the Bonzos was such that was released. I've got a lawyer friend who, I love the expression about the brain, the hurty bit. We didn't involve the hurty bit at all.
That's it, you didn't. And that's sometimes a release. You know, teenagers often want the hurty bit massaged or tickled or indeed tormented, but sometimes they just want it left alone.
Terrible part of life to go through.
There's no question, and sometimes one's emotions are not profound enough to sustain Schubert or Wagner. You actually just need a cheap piece of bubblegum music, and it better expresses your cheap emotions. We're not always profound, are we?
The Bonzos came to wider public attention on the ITV children's comedy show Do Not Adjust Your Set, alongside Terry Jones, Eric Idle, David Jason, Denise Coffey, Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin.
The Bonzos had been hired to provide musical interlude for what was essentially a children's programme. And the Bonzos were absolutely wonderful, very strange, very surreal. A lot of their lyrics were hallucinatory experiences written down. And there in the middle of it all was Neil, who sort of had a curious innocence about him, rather sweet-looking, choir boy-like. The others were all a mixed bag, and of course Neil and Viv Stanshall were sort of the two who really stood out, who led the band. And Viv was the great showman and showed off, but Neil quietly got on with it and clearly was the sort of leading light as a musician and leader of the band. And so he was a pop star, as well. But he was also had this wonderful surreal humour. And they constructed things and they made things. They blew the studio up and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But right from the very beginning, I just had a feeling that Neil was one of us, meaning Terry, myself and Eric. And that's where the friendship began.
Terry Gilliam talking to Neil in 2016.
We did hit it off. We clicked.
Kindred spirits, because when it first began there was a certain amount of circling going on, with Mike and Terry and Eric from Oxbridge. It was the counterculture and art school. What was missing was you, because you brought this wonderful device of linking things, which weren't just links, they were things in themselves.
But it broke the structure of the world that was sort of surrounding us at the time. That's what we were really doing. I don't think
nobody put things to look at in television, did they? Until you.
All the talent that came pouring out that really made the 60s were not Oxbridge people. They were the ones that didn't go.
Yeah.
And yet the Oxbridge people worked their way up through another route, i.e. David Frost. And that's what intrigued me about that time, because that mixture, when they did actually combine, like on Did Not Adjust Your Set, it was magic. There was two kinds of silliness at work.
I've only seen it in retrospect.
Kevin Eldon.
Mum and Dad, I think it was a little bit too ITV for them. My mates used to watch it. I was round mates a couple of times and watched it, and I absolutely loved it. It was the polar opposite of that stiff upper lip, middle-class Blue Peter type kids' entertainment that was around. It was made, obviously, by somebody who still had a link with his own childhood and was also plugged into the 60s as well. Those Pythons, the ones that were there, basically looked at the Bonzos and were inspired by that kind of lunacy to put it into their own stuff.
And Eric, to this day, sort of said, well, the Bonzos showed us that anarchy was fun.
But I think that's what was also happening in the States with the Oxbridge crowd, because they had been trained, they had been brought up properly, and suddenly they had a chance to run free.
And of course, this went on into Python, because But you were there with the images.
Images and music are really interesting, where words are the other side of the brain. It's that interplay between two different ways of approaching the world of silliness or madness or comedy or anarchy or anti-authoritarian, whatever. What I loved about the Bonzos was you just responded to it. It had very funny lyrics, it was great music, and visually it was just anarchy, it was just silliness, it was outrageousness.
He is never allowed to make any noise.
You're the one that looks like you couldn't really be bothered. No, everyone else looks frantic. Oh, this is the bit where I told Neil he looked bored on stage that I was telling you about. I didn't mean to upset him. I just wondered what was going through your head.
It's only television.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. You're very wonderful. And when I say that, I feel like throwing up. I'm going to like to introduce you to now pianist, harpsichord player Neil Innes, the composer of the next number, who's going to sing for you with rare indifference the equestrian statue.
Do I really look that poor?
Yeah, have another look.
I don't like to now.
I'll tell you a good example of your boredom. Equestrian statue, you're on a rocking horse.
Yeah, oh no, I know. I used to love all these French films in like the long-folded parody.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a little tear in the eye.
Yeah, no, it's lovely.
I think my role in the band was the brakes. You know, Viv was the sports car engine. You've got to be able to stop. You know, so I was the one that says, right, that's enough of that.
Someone had to concentrate, didn't they?
I deny bored. But
I wish I'd never brought it up now.
If I
Touched the
appear
nerve.
bored, I wasn't bored. But I was indifferent to the excitement of show business.
That's part of its charm, that you look bored. I like that. Probably went into my subconscious and I nicked it and used it for myself. Yvonne Innes again.
They were just an amazing bunch of characters, and Neil did his best to keep order keep order, but it was very difficult and but very funny. So those were very happy days. We went up a lot and just travelled all over the place with the Bonzos and had some really good times and really big explosions.
Kevin Eldon talking to Neil in 2016.
I think that what a lot of people who first listened to the Bonzos as kids or teenagers, who later got into comedy, thought was, wow, wouldn't it be fantastic to be as daft as that? Wouldn't it be challenging to be that funny and that imaginative? And so I think that is a real effect on people who just, wow.
We took that baton from the Goons.
Yeah.
That and the Alberts. Yeah. It was letting people in on the gag.
Yeah.
It's the weirdness, though, I think, that drew me in. I don't think there's enough weirdness now. I suppose there's only like Vic and Bob that are out and out weird just for the sake of it.
Yeah, but you're calling it weird, but I think it's closer to the truth than the pretend world.
I find it really comforting. It sort of makes life more bearable. The weirdness, you know, that I don't know why. There's something, because everything's absurd.
We were people who were rebellious, neo-Dadaists, iconoclasts, if you like. The gestures of the jesters. Yes, the gestures I prefer.
Vivian Stanchel.
But the jokers in various London art schools who came together because they were dissatisfied, really, with the quietness of expression. And we had a great deal to talk about. I don't really know what ordinary bands talk about. I mean, I suppose they talk about women and chords and wood and how many ways one can wear a rat. I'm not suggesting that we were a snooty lot, but we had much to fall back on, and our points of reference seemed to be larger than other bands. Also, we didn't care. We didn't think that this was our career. In fact, I still now find it difficult to think I am in showbiz.
Between 1965 and 1971, Neil and the rest of the Bonzos toured the UK and USA, where they're all singing, all tap dancing, literally explosive shows.
One review in Cardiff, I think it was, it bangs, belches, smut and smoke.
That's a great review.
It is. You know, we were pleased with it.
I was just absolutely bowled over.
Rick Wakeman.
The thing that annoyed me about pop music was that most of the people who played it couldn't.
They got the trousers right.
Well, that was because of the trouser press, baby. But all you guys could play, and it was really, really entertaining. And you used to pack places out.
We played all sorts of venues, working men's clubs, universities, nightclubs, and of course, the world-famous Marquee Club.
And for some reason,
Legs Larry Smith.
probably unfit for television, I'd kept a fridge full of raw meat. So we went to the Marquee and I hung these great slabs and legs and joints of meat. God knows, please help me, somebody, help me.
Being a vegetarian and disgusted by Larry's display of meat hanging on
Raw
stage.
meat, yeah, it was in the van. Yeah.
Rodney Slater.
Yes, that was difficult.
The audience were quite baffled by all of that, of course.
Let Viv take up the story. He's talking to John Walters.
We've disrupted things and made a lot of the things that bands were doing, their posturing and so on, look damn silly.
How did the Bonzo Dog Band, with your rather strange act, how did it go down?
Tremendous. I mean, it was really, it was really friendly. I felt very at home there, albeit it was, sweating and beastly and conditions were horrid. But, I mean, looking at all their bright, shining, expectant faces, I mean, we had a damn good time. So I think did the audience.
Well, you're the only person, I think, who's been able to come in and say, I have a tape of being there.
We collected instruments all of the time. Wherever we toured, terrible old twisted trombones and euphoniums and tubas and so on. So we had a mound. I mean, a mound must have been about 40 or 50 brass instruments, and we dished them out to the audience and then rehearsed them and said, right, now you do this, and they all behave themselves, as you'll hear.
And now we're going to do the recording for It Was a Great Party Until Somebody Found a Hammer. We've already asked for some volunteers. Can we have a few more guys to come up? We've got some trombones and trumpets and things over here. I mean, you don't have to play them, really. We must prefer if you couldn't. Okay, I think we've got enough people now. It's a load of rubbish, of course. I'll come in and I'll wave my whistle. Really? When you come in. All right, everyone quiet. Everyone quiet. Make sure we can hear the words, you see. It's jolly good fun. Yeah.
There was only two songs that Viv and I ever wrote together in the same room.
That's weird to think.
I know. He came with bits and I said, no, not like that. And I came with bits and he said, too many verses and things like that. And we quickly knocked it together. We did really have a good working relationship, shorthand, whatever. Apart from no matter who you vote for, the government always gets in, which is much later on. The only other song we wrote in the same room was Death Cab for Cutie. And I'd found
not a bad one to write together.
No, but it happened like that. I said, "Oh, Viv, look what I found in the Deptford Market." Yeah. And it was a true crime magazine with this lurid cover saying "True Crime," and then "Death Cab for Cutie." And underneath it, the other story was, "It was a great party until somebody found a hammer." We had a gig at the Marquee, and there was a recording studio there. And I also remember for some reason we wanted to do something with raw meat. But, I mean, the Bonzos were mental on the road because, we would work so hard. We used to sort of turn to each other and say, screaming fit, okay, screaming fit. And then we'd all scream at the top of our voices.
And is this what fueled what happened in the Marquee Club?
Yes, it was the sort of thing driving, pushing the envelope.
So you're ready to explode.
We kept pushing the envelope until we lost it.
Yeah.
Then we couldn't send any letters home. Yeah, and it was my job to say, well, I think it might be a good idea to most of the time play the same chord. I mean, it's all very well.
Yeah, anarchy's got to be organised.
It has. I'm sorry.
Adrian Edmondson talking to Neil in 2014.
You told me a great story once about Jazz Delicious Disgusting Cold. It was actually a Dadaist recording.
Oh, gosh, yes. Because Jerry Bron, our lovely manager and record producer at the time, had a bee in his bonnet. No one took more than 3 hours to do a track. And we said, Jerry, this can't be right. They were making stars and
those Beatles made it hard for everyone, didn't they?
I know they did. We thought, we'll claw back some time by doing a track that can't take more than one take.
Yeah.
So we thought we'll just take a 32-bar sequence, tap it in, and whatever happens, happens. And to make it more interesting, Rodney had never played the trombone before. Roger had never played the clarinet.
You all just moved one instrument to the left.
Yeah, and sadly, this was the first time Viv ever played the trumpet, and unfortunately, it became love. And it's hysterical.
This is in my will. I'm having it played at my funeral.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I thought going out of the church is going to sound quite... Should cheer him up a bit.
It should do.
Did the reunion tour.
Yeah.
I bought a trumpet in,
My
in
heart
Bristol
sank.
and learned to play it in the 5 minutes
You
before
did,
we went
yeah.
on, and did Jazz Discussing Cold. It was a moment of... Is apotheosis the right word? Does that mean becoming like a god?
And wasn't it your 50th birthday after that?
It probably was, yeah.
Yeah, and I bought you a
It's about that
silencer.
That's right, you did. My wife loves you.
I think that's my favourite Bonzo track.
Making an art form out of incompetence. That
No, it was a proper Dada track.
Exactly.
And we were all resolved to do it.
Yeah.
The fact it turned out to be a sort of timeless gem. I mean, going for the offbeat, the rhythm section, completely screw it. You can't rehearse that.
Did you actually play the piano on it, or
Yeah.
you were playing your own instrument?
No, and it's just as well, because I was the only one who... you hear the piano suddenly coming in, and now we're back.
Just lassoed him back in.
And it's his fault, because he was, when everyone's doing offbeat stop chord, he's the one that sort of pushes it the wrong way.
Yeah.
So half the camp goes with him and half was, you know.
I mean, when it does actually lose it, and then
Yeah.
teeter on the edge and then
Yeah.
come back, that's glorious. There is something wonderful about that kind of anarchic spirit, which is a good counterpoint to modern digital stuff where you can repair everything, you can make everything so absolutely flawlessly perfect.
Ooh yeah, ooh yeah, ooh yeah, ooh.
Let's go back to their childhoods. When the Bonzos made the jump from trad jazz parody into grown-up chart-troubling rock band. I'll let Neil take up the story.
When it came to do the single, getting badgered to do a single, we didn't need to. We were the highest paid band in the country without a record in the charts.
I'm the Urban Spaceman, baby, I've got speed. I've got everything I need.
I wrote the song Urban Spaceman from a hotel in Manchester looking at a building site. In those days, brownfield sites or whatever were called urban spaces. And then an ambulance went by going, da 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 da, there's the tune. The lyrics were all about the Mrs. Clever mops the floor with something else and does it in half the time that Mrs. Dim does. Yeah. So all these people, smiley faces and shiny things, advertising, all these impossible people, we don't exist. A little side swipe at the consumer society. Viv used to hang out in all the clubs, you know, and he knew Paul and he knew John from the Beatles. Them. Viv was like that anyway. Yeah. And Paul used to mimic it, and they'd be a couple of gentlemen, you know, sort of, well, put another one in there, boy, you know. Well, what are you doing? He said, we've got to make this blasted single, you know. We've got this producer, and we can't get the blighter off the knobs. Well, Paul said, well, I'll come and produce it for you, you know. Really? Okay, so that was...
3:30 in the morning, this is.
Yes. So we go to see Jerry. All right, we'll do the single, but we don't want you to produce it.
Yes.
Oh, and who do you think you're going to get? Hello, how are you? Everything all right? You know, so he goes over to the grand piano. I said, I've just written this. And he starts playing Hey Jude.
Yeah.
And it goes on and on and on. And I think, he's winding up Jerry, you know, because we've only got 3 hours to do this track, you know, and he's playing this dirge.
Taking 2 hours up with that.
Yes, exactly. And so anyway, it took 8.5 hours. Then we get to the end, and Viv wants to record his garden hose.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah.
So Viv said, well, it goes like this. And he's wheeling it around, and the engineer says, you can't record that. And Paul says, yeah, you can.
Here's Stephen Fry talking to Neil in 2016.
I know a lot of people who bought that single and they loved it. It's a wonderful, catchy tune. But also, what they did was they played the B-side.
This is the B-side of our platter, sports fans. And I'm singing just for you, covered in sequins. In the canyons of your mind.
And that was suddenly a whole new hello. Because you could say Urban Spaceman, yeah, this is a pop outfit, maybe.
Yeah.
They make good poppy tune and it's got quite a little
Pressure
bit of
from the
satire.
business.
But then
Pressure
suddenly
from the
B is a
I know.
whole other world.
Exactly.
Hello, what's this? The wardrobe of my soul in the section labelled shirts.
But it's so
She's
close
not
to a
there.
Barry Manilow lyric, isn't it, really?
Across the mountains of your child.
The idea came to do a really awful guitar solo. And so I had a track and they played it and I did this awful guitar solo. And we all fell about laughing and the engineer hadn't recorded it. So I said, well, press the ruddy red button then and I'll try and do it again. And that was as close as I got to it.
My darling.
The first one must have been magnificent. I like to think. But there's that very same studio. There's a picture of me with a long wig and whatever. It was the cover of Beat Instrumental, where I was made Guitarist of the Month.
Oh,
now you see, the music industry had a sense of humour in those days.
It did.
Sounding wistful.
So, Neil, whenever I sit in front of you, I feel a little bit trembly and excited because you were a schoolboy crush in a sort of way. Not in an erotic way, don't pull that face. I'll tell you how it started for me. I was 13 actually, at school, and I didn't really like the prog rock, the Jethro Tulls and those sort of things that all my friends were buying. I mean, I didn't hate them, but they didn't really do anything for me.
You've seen one guy on one leg with a flute.
You've seen them all, exactly. And then a friend of mine called Rick Carmichael had a yellow vinyl album. It was called Tadpoles, and it had a little slidey out insert which made the cutout eyes of the group, the band, very funny, and it had written along the top, tackle the tunes you tapped your tootsies to on Thames TV's Do Not Adjust Your Set.
Yes.
Which I thought was a great line, didn't know what it meant. Turned it over and I saw the list of tracks starting with Hunting Tigers Out in India. And this is odd, and I played it, and I fell rapturously in love with the mixture of comedy, parody, and also a celebration of old jazz that I didn't know about. I'm here just sitting in this microphone looking at you, wanting again to offer my thanks for making a pretty weird school time so much more bearable.
I'm going to sort of wind this up in a radio style by saying, Stephen Fry, thank you very much.
Bless you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Neil. And thank you, Mr. Apollo. This is Neil Innes, Dip My Brain in Joy. I'm Diane Morgan, and I love Neil Innes. My producer is Laura Grimshaw, and she loves Neil Innes. That was the beginning and the Bonzos. Still to come.
I used to have a yellow duck on my head.
He actually really loved doing completely potty, off-the-wall things.
You and Dirk were the writers in the Ruttles.
Well, we had pens.
He couldn't just write the straight song because that wouldn't have interested him.
He was always looking for new ways to cheer people up.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've suffered for my music. Now it's your turn.
And there'll be more from Neil Innes's weird and wonderful life and times next week at the same time. Back on the road, it's the antidote to panel games.
You join us today on a return visit to Huddersfield. That's not a phrase you hear every day.
With Yorkshire songs.
Hey-up, town girl.
And ruin a band with one letter.
Ragu against the machine.
Featuring the final appearances by Tim Brooke Taylor.
Small feces.
The new series of I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue with Jack D.
Always rely on you for a classy start.
Starts next Monday night at 10 on BBC Sounds and Radio 4 Extra.
I've suffered for my music, and now it's your turn.
All the prophets of doom can always find room in a world full of worry and fear.
Protest song by Neil Innes, the music and comedy legend of the Bonzos and the Ruttles. I'm Diane Morgan and I love Neil Innes. And I particularly love the protest song, the harmonica alone, genius. You're listening to Neil Innes, Dip My Brain in Joy, and this is part 2, Ego Warrior. Part 1, Bangs, Belches, Smut and Smoke, is now available on BBC Sounds. And with a title like that, you know you want to listen. We're celebrating the life, work and absurdist tendencies of Neil Innes in this collage of archive interviews, performances and programmes, conversations with family, friends and fans, including his wife Yvonne, Stephen Fry, bandmates Phil Jackson, Ken Thornton, John Halsey, better known to Ruttles fans as Barry Wham, and Michael Palin.
He was just so good at everything he did, and what he did was so charming. No one could listen to Neil or watch Neil without a smile breaking out. He was always looking for new ways to cheer people up.
Everybody he worked with absolutely loved him and loved working with him. You'd have to go quite a long way to make Neil dislike you.
He was not afraid to have serious, poignant moments in the midst of all the fun.
How long would you say were you in your pomp?
48 minutes.
I may be accused of being confused, but I'm average weight for my height. My philosophy, like color TV, is all there in black and white. Rain on a tin roof sounds like a drum. We're marching for freedom today. Yay! Turn on your headlights and sound your horn if people get in the way.
Neil's influence permeates modern comedy. He appeared in Monty Python and the Holy Grail and Monty Python's Life of Brian, and he's one of only 2 non-Pythons with a writing credit on Monty Python's Flying Circus, the other being Douglas Adams. He wrote and performed in his own BBC TV series Innes Book of Records, and Rutland Weekend Television with Eric Idle, which was the birthplace of his pitch-perfect Beatles parody, The Ruttles. He also released over 20 albums, and he toured regularly with one-man shows and with various bands. Here's a short burst from Ken Thornton's Personal Archive, a show he and Neil performed together, recorded in October 2004 in Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay, this song is a very new song, and it kind of explains where my head is these days, and it's called On Top of My Neck. Thank you. No, I can't resist a really poor joke. Anyway, it's called One of Those People, and it's, well, we'll just do it, and we'll pick it up as we go along, so that. Just one of those people who want to feel good all the time. I don't want no bad news messing with my mind. I don't want no smart-ass media clown wising me up and then dumbing me down. I'm just one of those people who puts up with crap every day. Not just any ordinary crap, I'm talking about a constant stream here, continually getting in my way. I got crap in the workplace, crap on TV, crap in the global economy. I'm just one of those people who want to feel good all the time. Singing doo-doo-doo. Come on. It's like a folk club. Yes, I'm one of those people who want to feel good all the time. Oh Lord, I ask you, is it such a crime? The last thing I need is a feeling of guilt when I'm wading through treacle on balsa wood stilts. I'm just one of those people some people call paranoid. Well, who is and who isn't these days? It's hard to tell. When so many people have so many good reasons to feel more than just a little annoyed. But what can you do when you're sure somebody is fooling around with
Bandmate and fanmate, Ken Thornton.
Yeah, it's hard to describe Neil. He's obviously a very sweet guy. He's very generous. The start of me playing with him, it kind of started as, and I still can't believe I said this. I said, well, you know, if you're ever going to be playing over in the United States, I know a guitar player that would pretty much do it just for the fun of it. And he said, would this guitarist be anywhere in a 5-foot radius of me right now? Immediately he realized that I loved the music and I would do it just for the joy of playing it, you know. Within a year, I was playing with him and he was very fun and funny, so you couldn't help but have a good time in his presence. Just playing music with him, that was really the best thing.
Longtime friend and fan, Arthur Smith.
The musician, a composer, a lyricist, a poet, a witty character actor too, and a very funny man. The combination of his abilities raised him into something unique. I don't think there's ever been anyone quite like Neil Innes, and there probably won't be again. He was a unique combination of a lot of different skills that no one else could really compete with. He probably could have been a multi-billionaire and taken over the world, but he wasn't bothered about that. He did it because he loved it.
No, he never worked for money, ever.
Neil's wife, Yvonne Innes.
He was just like a sort of, it's a very hackneyed term, a Renaissance man. But he was interested in everything. He was interested in acting, directing, playing music, and luckily he had a chance to do it. But the big drawback with that is that if somebody wants somebody to write film music, they will go to a musician who just makes music. They won't go to somebody who's an actor, who's funny. He was so good at writing music. But, if you saw him as a comedian, he probably wouldn't be your first choice. He was just a bit too good at most things.
Ruttles bandmate Phil Jackson.
That's what made him so great. He had everything. He was so good musically and so clever and so funny and also quite colourful and slightly hippie-like. But it all came together, and I guess you could say some lucky breaks, knowing some cool people. And also he was just a very down-to-earth, nice guy who wasn't looking for any kind of stardom. And he said, I just looked at something and thought, that might be fun, and I'll do it. And he just kept doing that.
Here's John Halsey, better known to Ruttles fans as Barry One. We're hearing from a lot of Ruttles here, but they aren't really talking about the Ruttles. We'll get to the Ruttles, I promise. Anyway, here's Barry, John Halsey.
He was a really good friend, yeah. He included me in lots of things that he didn't have to include me in, but just because we were friends, I think. He did flirt with fame, but I don't think he really fancied it, He was as famous as he wanted to be. When we did a Ruttles gig, obviously everybody wanted to say hello to Neil and get his autograph, and he had time for everybody on these gigs. He did throw himself into things. I mean, that Raggy Dolls thing that he did was just amazing. He wrote and performed the theme tune, did all the narration, wrote all the stories. No wonder he didn't do all the illustrations as well.
Oh yes, we'll get to the Raggy Dolls as well. There is so much to talk about. Neil was a man who was interesting and interested. He threw himself fully into all that he did. He took time and care over every word and every chord, collaborated with so many people, accomplished in so many different areas of music and entertainment. It's hard to know where best to start. He had a prolific and diverse solo career that spanned one-man shows, gigging with various bands, acting, writing, songwriting, composing, producing, and on top of being comedically and musically gifted, he was also a really kind and generous man. I'm just listing nice things about him now. I might just stop talking and see what happens.
He was just so good at everything he did.
Oh, it's Michael Palin. What a treat.
The slightly sad thing was I felt Neil didn't really get the credit and the plaudits he deserved. What he did was so charming. No one could listen to Neil or watch Neil without a smile breaking out. That's a big, big thing to be able to do. Technically, in terms of taste, always ahead of the game, I thought. He was very good on new ideas, and he just loved trying things out. But yes, he was always looking for new ways to cheer people up.
Michael's talking about Neil's BBC TV show Inez Book of Records, which ran for 3 series from 1979 to 1981. A programme that was both a product of its time and ahead of its time. Neil set his music to beautiful films and sketches with guest stars, recurring characters, incisive themes and absurd surrealism. And one of those characters was P.C. Palin, played by Michael Palin. Sorry, carry on, Michael Palin.
It was nice to be involved. I was quite busy then doing other stuff, but if Neil rang me up and said, can you come and do something? I'd drop everything and get down there. Neil just let me go on, and I did a whole piece about this policeman going on about how dangerous the world was now, and mothers with babies could be concealing ballistic missiles and all that sort of stuff.
When I help a little old lady across the road nowadays, I can no longer take it for granted that she is a little old lady, and not a dangerous anti-personnel device planted there by the forces of international crime. How can I be sure that beneath the little sort of beige cardigan that her sister knitted for her the Christmas before last, she hasn't got 240 pounds of gelignite strapped in interconnecting rods to the side of her chest? How can I be sure? When I look inside her little shopping bag, underneath the apples cakes and the jar of Vic, I'm not going to find a sawn-off waffle PPK capable of knocking the head off a chicken 6 miles away. Now, I like helping old ladies across the road, don't get me wrong. But this is 1981. And so fast has been the decline in the respect for human life that I now have no option but to leave that little old lady in the middle of the road and run like hell.
It was completely ad-libbed. And Neil, to his great credit, I think put the whole thing in the show, which was lovely. And it's something I really enjoyed doing, and it's quite funny, actually, I have to say. Most people, who will remember things like fish slapping dance and all that. Don't remember enough really of Neil's great shows. It was great.
Innes Book of Records offered an early example of music video presentation, like a conceptual MTV in pre-MTV days, and made on a BBC budget. It gave visuals to Neil's beautiful songs that made sense of the lyrics, and in some cases, new versions of songs entirely. Here's Neil himself talking about Innes Book of Records as part of Neil Innes live in concert for Radio Wales in 2001.
We knew what we'd do in the programme, but we didn't know what to call it. So on the drive home, suddenly it occurred to me, the title for the show. So as soon as I got in, I phoned Ian and I said, Ian, I've got the title for the show. And of course, he's more cautious than I am. He said, yes. So I said, Parody's Lost. Oh, yes, it is quite good, isn't it? So anyway, I was all gung-ho about it. And anyway, that's where it was all agreed and, Parody's Lost was it. And off we went to filming. And I thought several characters. There was the protest singer, Bob Nylon. And there was the sort of like man next door, Nobby Normal. Sort of all the angst and everything about suburban life and all that. And then there was Nick Cabaret, who had this sort of evening dress, white tie and sort of makeup and a wig and all that kind of thing. Looked just like the character Joel Grey played in Cabaret. And that's why he's called Nick Cabaret. Anyway, I was dressed as him. So honest. So I was dressed as him, sort of up a hill somewhere in Somerset. And this sort of couple came along with an elderly dog. It was cruel taking them out up on hills. But anyway, they came along and said, oh, what are you doing? I said, oh, we're making a film for BBC Two. I said, oh, yes, what's it called? I said, Parody's Lost. I beg your pardon? Parody's Lost, like, not Paradise Lost, but Parody's Lost. It's sort of music. And I said, well, yes, very nice, good luck. And I began to get worried, I hadn't really got a good title. And what clinched it was I saw a can of film, with the camera tape around it, as they did, and laundry pen marking and saying, Parody's Lost. So I capitulated, and Ian had been sort of trying to suggest, well, I think Innes Book of Records is quite a good title. And I thought, oh, that's cheaper. But anyway, that's what we decided it would be, the Innes Book of Records. Songs and pictures about people and things. And if anyone ever wondered what it was about, we'd failed. But we had wonderful guests like Sir John Betjeman, John Cooper Clarke, and various people, including rugby clubs who like to dress up in women's clothes, doing disco routines for charity. Anyway, but it did give me a chance to write all kinds of different songs, and although I've been labelled as a parodist, I do write straight songs and some love songs and whatever. So here's one of the songs which falls into the more straightforward category. An old man lay dying beneath cold city skies, an ominous look in his derelict eyes. The moment of death for him had no sting. His soul had the power to grant him one thing. So he said, let my dream shine through. Let my dream shine through. Passing nearby was a shiny black car. In the front, a chauffeur, in the back, a cigar that lit up the face of a middle-aged man who bought and sold stock like nobody can. And he said, let my dream shine through. Let my dream shine through. Close by, two young lovers were getting it on, and of all the positions they knew everyone.
And after they'd tried every trick in the book, he lay on the bed with a faraway look, thinking, let my dream shine through. Let my dream shine through.
As Neil said just before that beautiful song, Let My Dreams Shine Through, the man responsible for the title and for producing Innes Book of Records was long-serving BBC producer and director Ian Keel.
Every day we were shooting the 3 series, I was stunned at the wonderful talent of Neil. So engaging in all the characters he was portraying. Very clever words. It's not only doorknobs that come off in your hand comes to mind. He was very funny, modest, reliable, rock solid in his concentration, understandable diction throughout, always in tune and on the note, phenomenal at miming to backing tracks. Really became quite fearless. He played Tarzan, and we did it at a stately home owned by the Duke of Devonshire. And they just said, do what you like, go where you want. And I said, well, I've got Neil dressed as Tarzan, and we'd like to have him diving into one of your ponds. I said, do you mind doing this, Neil? Oh, no, he said, let's do it. So he actually really loved doing completely potty, off-the-wall things that we never rehearsed, simply because Neil didn't want to get wet and then have to dry out and do it all over again. So Neil could be seen on a promontory of rock, and then he just dived into this pond, which sounds easy enough, except that none of us had the faintest idea how deep it was. And I said, are you sure you want to do this? And he said, well, it'll be all right. We had 2 different philosophies. Neil's philosophy always was, it'll find its own level. And mine was, any plan is better than nothing. So I said, all right, well, we'll do it. And he did dive in, and everybody held their breath. He went in singing, and when he came up, he was still singing, and he was still in sync, which was absolutely unbelievable. That was one that we definitely did not do again. And it was fantastic, you know. We were all completely stunned by it. He was so professional, even underwater, and a lovely, warm, caring personality behind everything he did. He really was a lovely guy and a real loss to us all. He was a real friend. I left all the songs to Neil and John Altman. John Altman really helped Neil to produce the songs and was a wonderful arranger and a real gift for, if you like, orchestration, adding accordions or string quartets or anything like that. Very ingenious, very bright, and Neil really appreciated him.
And here's John Altman.
I did all 3 series of the Innes Book of Records with Neil, which was a lot of music. I mean, it really was. But again, the schedule was so tight. I just recorded blocks of traditional jazz bands, country and western bands, string quartets. We had to plan it out in almost military precision. We really did it as a production line. 1 session, 4 songs a session, get them out, get the next lot in. Off you go again, 4 more songs. The most sort of frightening time was when we did a string quartet session in the morning and a banjo-led country and western band in the afternoon. And it was a real culture shock to go from this placid Schubertian moment into... and we both sort of fell about. It was a very happy time. There were 94 musicians on the Innes Book of Records, which would never, ever happen now. You would never get a budget to be able to do that. And they were the best players in the world. And you were able to book them as session players, and they would come along and they would do exactly what you wanted them to do, and they'd go away. It was a great concept. It was ahead of its time, and I don't think people at that time quite knew how to pigeonhole the programme. and it sort of fell through the cracks a bit. It became a cult program for sure, and lots more people than I actually knew were influenced by it. In fact, an Oscar-winning composer told me that she had learned to arrange by watching the Guinness Book of Records every week. She'd worked out how to do things, which was wonderful, you know, it's a marvellous tribute. Neil would send me a cassette of the song. It would be him playing guitar or piano and singing. And then the whole conception of what the song was usually down to me. When I got the songs, I could hear the parody, and I would arrange them in gentle parody of what an arrangement would be for an Elton John or a Billy Joel, whoever was being parodied at the time.
A million miles from the old routine, a midnight candle burned. I believe in believing, I'm deeply concerned. Walking down the runway, through the pouring rain, stretching out my arms like a supersonic plane. Godfrey Daniel, he ain't done nothing wrong. Let him go back to Ohio, or wherever he belongs.
It was always done affectionately, so they stood up in their own right. They weren't overcooked. There's a very delicate balance when you're writing for comedy film or for comedy records of not going too raucous and whack, 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 whack. You can point up the comedy, but you don't have to be slapstick. And I don't think he ever was. And that's the sensibility we shared. So when you heard the songs on the Guinness Book of Records, for example, they all stood up on their own. Apart from being funny in terms of what they were parodying, they stood up as pieces of work, as complete pieces.
Yvonne Inez again.
The characters were already there when he made the series, but he added to it as it was going along. It was really good because it was done with enthusiasm. You know, he had a really good time doing it, I have to say. But they did spend quite a lot of money on it. The costumes we still got, you know. But then Neil used a lot of costumes in his stage performances. And he took great risks, I think, because, you know, several times I thought, well, it's not going to work. You know, it's just a bit too far out. But it really did work.
I guess I'll never know or truly understand. Anyhow, it's not just doorknobs that come off in your hand.
You're listening to Neil Innes' Dip My Brain in Joy on BBC Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds. I'm your host, Diane Morgan. A personal favourite of mine from Guinness Book of Records is the video for Quiet Talks and Summer Walks. Neil's dressed as a daisy, naturally, and it made me realise that the song is about watching the world go by without being part of it. It's so sad. I told him so. I really like the video for Quiet Talks and Summer Walks. I find it really sad. You're dressed as a daisy.
Well, you say daisy, but there was a kind of little friction going on between wardrobe and makeup.
Oh.
Wardrobe had done one sort of thing, and the makeup had put sort of thing, and I thought, right here.
Yeah,
okay.
you had sort of things growing out your face.
Yeah. No, but that was a Bonzo song. Yeah. No,
it's so sad. I never really thought much about the lyrics until I saw that you were dressed as a daisy.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly all made sense, and it was so sad. Bandmate Ken Thornton.
I came across this website where it was like a review of Taking Off and Guinness Book of Records albums. For each song, he has some comments, and for some of them, he was kind of like, well, this song isn't funny at all. I'm like, yeah, not everything he does is funny. He does poignant things, and there's layers to it. Comedy and being very serious and saying something important. Some of my favorite songs are not comedy at all, like Song for Yvonne. Or This Love of Ours, you know, a lot of those songs off the Idiot album, they're just, you know, they're not trying to be funny. They're just beautiful songs and very heartfelt. There's some people that just think of him as he's supposed to be doing comedy stuff, and I think they miss out on a big part of who he was and the work he did. I think they're missing out on some of that more serious work, and sensitivity and humor in his music. That's how he was too. I remember when George passed away, George Harrison. He sent me an email saying, "Yeah, we're here. We've got candles lit." It was a big deal. And then he wrote that song, "Friends at the End." So that was one of the moments that we had that was always very serious when we did these acoustic sets. But then it would come time to do that song. It was like the one song that neither of us wanted to ever play a bum note during. It had to be perfect for George. He was not afraid to have serious, poignant moments in the middle, in the midst of all the fun.
Telephone rings, you pick it up, you say hello, hello, says an old friend, how are you? I'm fine, you say, and you? There's a little awkward small talk and then the bad news. Have you heard? So-and-so's copped the big one just like that, it was out of the blue. You want to know how bad? Just a matter of time is the clinical view. Oh my, nobody wants to die, but it can hit you right between the eyes when you're talking about friends at the end of the line. You put the phone down thinking, oh God, not another one, then close to tears. You selfishly begin to count up all the loved ones you have lost over the years. You try to picture their faces while there's something going on in the place where your stomach used to be. Then you realize it's the oldest and the coldest fear ever known to humanity. Fallen fruit must decompose, feed the bugs and busy those who squirm around in the graveyard mud, empty bedpans and wash away the blood. Oh my, nobody wants to die, but it can hit you right between the eyes when you're talking about friends at the end of the line. On a cold and sunny late November day, you walk around under clear blue skies. Kick some leaves, sniff the bonfire smoke, and attempt to philosophize. How will it be when it's your turn to go? Will you find a few famous last words to say? Or will you simply fall asleep, knowing nothing in the universe ever really goes away? Oh my, nobody wants to die, but it can hit you right between the eyes when you're talking about friends at the end of the line. Here come all the suns, here comes all night, everything and nothing in one. Sweet kiss goodnight. Everything and nothing, all creatures great and small. Everything and nothing, God bless us all. Worn out shoes and rusty cars, we're all stuff of stars, subatomic, carbon-based. Everything is made in space, as it was before your birth. Nothing lasts forever on earth, nor mine. Nobody wants to die, but it can hit you right between the eyes when you're talking about friends at the end of the line. When you're talking about friends at the end of the line. When you're talking about friends at the end of the line.
Friends at the End, a song for George Harrison, written and performed by Neil Innes with Ken Thornton on guitar, recorded in October 2004 in Lafayette, Indiana. In 1992, Neil appeared on Nicky Campbell's Late Night Radio 1 show.
A troubadour, a minstrel, a polymath, a man of many talents who is with me tonight. Neil Innes, can I just tell the general public some of the things you've been involved in your multicoloured...
Of course you can, Nicky. Of course you can. You forgot the ice hockey, by the way.
And the ice hockey as well. And the mud wrestling, and Rutland Weekend Television, and All You Need Is Cash, of course, the Ruttles. As Pete Best was the fifth Beatle, you are, I suppose, the seventh Python or something like that.
Yes, it's one of those difficult things, like Paul Donovan was called the English Dylan or something. The public is always, you never what you think you are. It's what the public or sometimes PR people make you.
So you've had various images foisted upon you. Delighted to have you into the night, and just looking at you, haven't changed one iota since I last saw your cherubic little features staring at me on the old Python shows and in the Python
I thought
films.
you meant my T-shirt. Yeah. Good job it's radio, folks.
So these songs, I mean, you talk about a pastiche, which is obviously, some of it is parodic, if there is an
some of it could be a future tiche as well, if there's such a thing. But,
this clever wordplay is not above my audience, but way above me. But can I just ask you, do you never get the urge, because you've written some memorable parodic songs, parodies, do you ever get the urge to write a standard, write a proper sensible song that's going to last?
Yes, I've written a few actually, but I'm never sort of really allowed to do them because people always expect me to be silly and pull faces or wear silly props and leap about. As I was saying earlier, very often you're not allowed to be who you'd like to be.
Well, who do you want to be then?
Well, don't really know. No, I'm not a normal egocentric, I suppose. I just want to be me. I mean, I ought to be able to do silly songs as well as straight songs.
Do you do straight songs? A lot of straight songs?
Well, I have written them, yeah. But I mean,
they always seem to have a Neil Innes twist about them, though.
Well, I've given up. I try and make the straight bits sort of like a rhythm section and silly bits on top, and you can figure it all out, really. I wrote this other song, actually, which I hope Frank Sinatra would do, called Said and Done. That's right. Because 3 at a time, 3 at a time, troubles, they say, come 3 at a time.
Well, was that not the problem? When you wrote a song which you hoped Frank Sinatra would do, did you not end up writing a Sinatra pastiche?
No, that was real. That could be sung straight. That's a genuine, I mean, but as I was saying, in those days I was being told to parody things because people thought that's what I was doing,
Well, I'm glad you're going to play tonight. You're with long-time collaborator Andy Roberts.
Yes, good old Andy.
And what's the first one you're going to do?
God, well...
Before we talk about all your images.
Why don't we start off with something that's actually called What's Going On, because I actually don't really know what these politicians and other people are saying. And I think it's high time somebody told us in plain English, just what was going on. Okay, right, here you go. It's man bites dog in the papers again. Oh, look at the news, can anybody hear? Tell me what's going on. Soccer yup crushed in Flap Queen Sexton. Oh, look at the news, can anybody hear? Tell me what's going on. Who do these people think they are? They really make me yawn. I'm tired of their silly season stuff and their circles in the corn. millions have landed. A housewife says it's true. One of them made love to me in the back of his flying saucer all night long. Ooh. Well, I guess if I was that lonely, I'd say so too.
Here's Michael Palin.
He was happy doing what he did, but I think he probably should have been more popular. But then maybe he shouldn't have been, because the whole idea of popularity and showbiz popularity was kind of rather anathema to Nick, really. Anything that restricted his ability to be silly and strange, and institutions he didn't like. And I think that was in his character, to want to be sort of watching what was going on, doing his own thing. He was very, very concerned to make sure that the things he did were things he loved and liked doing. He didn't really have that kind of fierce, ambitious ruthlessness which pushes you to the top, but then leaves you at the top with no one around. You know, you're just there. Okay, I'm the star. But what Neil liked was working with people and being able to move from one group to another. And I think people, whether it was the Beatles or Python, we needed Neil. You needed someone just outside the group who understood the group.
Yvonne Inez.
He had a lack of ambition as far as being famous goes, and a lack of ambition as far as pushing himself forward. He wanted to push his songs forward, but he couldn't just write the straight song. Well, he could have done, but he couldn't just write the straight song because that wouldn't have interested him. It would have bored him. He'd puzzle endlessly over a line for a song, get it round one way and then try it another way and then try something else and come back to the first one. And it was like listening to this whirring cogs in his brain. It'd take a long time to search for exactly the right word in a song. He wouldn't just stick a word in, Moon and June and stuff. He needed to have exactly what he wanted. So he spent a lot of time doing that, to get that last word right. Nothing was more pleasing to Neil than working with really good musicians. He absolutely came alive. He liked to be challenged by them, really. If they were good, then he would be better. However they played, he would work himself up to that sort of level. But as soon as he got onto stage with an audience, he went, he relaxed. He loved people. He was generous and humble. As far as he was concerned, you were as good at whatever you did as he was. And everybody he worked with absolutely loved him and loved working with him. I think he liked everybody. You know, you'd have to go quite a long way to make Neil dislike you.
In the 1980s, Neil made a diversion into children's television. Neil had worked in children's entertainment before that, of course. He and the Bonzos and some of the Pythons worked on the 1960s children's TV show Do Not Adjust Your Set. And Neil was involved in the 1970s chaos that was Tiswas. He also produced the Tiswas album, with a certain infamous rabbit. Here's Neil telling Rick Wakeman about it.
I had the honour of producing their album.
Did you? Really?
I did, and had Ollie Halsall on there.
So you did the Bucket of Water song?
I did
and
the
all
Bucket
those?
of Water, the Dying Fly.
Oh, excellent.
And the highlight for me was when little Matthew came to sing Bright Eyes. And he'd been on there, and his mother had made him a rabbit costume. And I knew about this, you know. And I said, okay, and I'm being Mr. Producer. I said, okay, well, you've got him coming in at such and such time. Lenny Henning was there, Chris Tarrant, and they're all sniggering away. I said, oh, never mind, they're just being silly. Anyway, the moment arrives, and I meet Matthew, his mum and dad. I said, well, great, let's go and do it, shall we? And they're still sniggering. Well, he can't do it unless he puts on his rabbit costume. So, but there's this great big boom stand with a Neumann hanging down, and all I can see from the control room is two ears.
Bright eyes, burning like fire.
Now I know why they're giggling. And we made a track for him, and he goes, bright eyes, burning like fire. And it was very, very hard not to sort of cry with laughter.
But in the 1980s, children's TV became Neil's main source of joy, with Puddle Lane, Tumbledown Farm and the Raggy Dolls. The heartfelt, animated tale of imperfect toys, rejected for commercial sale, who band together and have adventures helping people and each other. Sad Sack, Lucy, Dotty, Hi-Fi Claude, Princess and Back to Front fix other children's toys, learn other languages, cook and clean and pick up litter and generally make the world a better place. The series was designed to encourage kids to think positively about difference and generally made the world a better place. Neil narrated the series, voiced all the characters, composed all the music, and wrote all 127 episodes. It's gorgeous, and my producer Laura was brought up on it, as was Neil's bandmate Phil Jackson.
When I first did a rehearsal with Neil, I said to him, "Can I play you my favourite song of yours?" And he said, "Oh, all right, okay." And then I said to him, you do know that I am as old as your youngest son." And he went, "Oh dear, okay." And so I started playing him this. And I started playing him a bit of Raggy Dolls. And he was like, "Oh, that's a good tune." Oh. The opening line is, it's not much of a life if you're just a pretty face. That just floors me. It's all about being accepted. It's like, wow, that's an amazing idea.
Yvonne Inez again.
A lot of fans say that. They got to know Neil through Raggy Dolls. We were living in the middle of nowhere. We've always lived in the middle of nowhere. And we had a sort of barn. I had a studio upstairs and he had a studio downstairs. And he'd be writing Raggy Dolls and day would turn into night, night would turn into day. He just wasn't stopping. He didn't come back over to the house. I had to get food carried to him. Really, when he got stuck into a project, that was it. You didn't see him for days. He got into the characters so well. He was always one take Innes.
Raggy dolls, dolls like you and me.
The music blared out louder than ever, while the family ate and ate and ate. Pretty soon, food wrappers, chicken bones, paper bags and empty bottles were scattered about everywhere. Sacre bleu, this is an outrage, muttered Claude. First they ruined the duck pond, and now they ruin our field. It's disgraceful, thought Dottie. That radio is so loud I can hardly hear myself think.
I've got a horrible feeling we'll have to clear that mess up after them,
thought Sadsack. Suddenly there was a flash of lightning and a clap of thunder.
Oh well, that's the end of that, said the father. I'm not staying here if it's going to rain. But I'm still eating, whined the little boy.
Well, you can finish it in the car.
The Raggy Dolls watched as the family drove off.
I knew it,
said Sadsack.
They've left all their litter behind.
Sadsack had looked around and found a litter bin. The dolls started work on picking up the litter.
At least it stopped raining,
thought Sadsack. The mother duck and her ducklings helped tidy the field. Gradually the mountain of litter disappeared.
Neil also adapted and set to music the stories in Terry Jones' marvellous children's book Fairy Tales for Channel 4 in a series called East of the Moon. Here's Neil and producer Joy Whitby speaking about the series on Open Air in May 1988, introduced by Radio 4 and 4 Extra's own Susan Ray.
Now, anyone who worried that fairy stories would not survive the realism of television can relax, because Sunday morning on Channel 4 for the last 5 weeks has been East of the Moon. The series consists of fairy stories and songs, and it's unusual because it mixes dramatisation of some stories with cartoon animation of others. It started with fairy stories by Terry Jones. Producer Joy Whitby said she wanted to build a series on them, and Terry suggested that his longtime friend and collaborator from Monty Python days, Neil Innes, should adapt them for television. Now, Neil has also added his own specially written songs in a mixture which uses television as the door into a world of fantasy and imagination.
Now, Neil, we've mentioned that you and Terry Jones are old mates. I mean, did you find adapting his stories for television jolly difficult? I would think so.
Yes, the wonderful thing about fairy tales is you can do anything, and again, the pen is mightier than the budget, because you can have a dragon setting itself on fire and an ogre chopping his own leg off, and
yes.
I mean, that's Spielberg budget time, really, to achieve that sort of thing. So that's why we show some of them to be animation, and Terry wanted it as well, to have a feeling of, the Innes Book of Records.
Yes.
So mix music with the stories and try and make a sort of a length of time, which was an entertainment.
Because you have written all the scripts and you've written the music as well, the songs, yes?
Yeah.
Did he just leave it to you? Or...
Totally.
Oh.
He said, do what you like with them, because I don't want to be breathing down your neck. And he said, the only reason because my first reaction was, well, why don't you do them? You're a film director, you've written a good script or two in your time.
Yes.
And he said, I just feel too close to them.
A question I should know the answer to, but I don't, is how you do little fairies in the same shot as large bunny rabbits, for instance.
Tricks.
No, you get real ones.
Neil, as always, keeping the magic and fun alive. Here's Yvonne Inez.
Neil found much of the inspiration for his work in children's television from being with our three sons, Miles, Luke and Barney. He always said he had a 4-year-old brain, and he sort of became like a 4-year-old, playing with them, drawing and making music. They were good years. And although our sons now have all sorts of different occupations, Neil's music and lyricism and his love will always, I think, be a huge part of their being, of their soul.
In 2010, Neil took a look back on his career with Janice Forsyth on Radio Scotland's Laughed Off the Page.
I enjoyed what I do, obviously, but I don't really have any ambition.
Well, you've achieved a lot in an accidental way. And it's funny, actually, just, name-checking the Pythons and the Beatles. And, so many people across the decades would have sold their granny for the chance to have, met them, let alone worked with either of those extraordinary combos. But you've always been, I think, very resistant to the whole idea of celebrity culture.
I was lucky enough to meet people, who turned out to be rich and famous, but because we were working together or shared an outing or some fun or whatever. And, people are ordinary people. And I do kind of suspect, why, we're suddenly in this kind of culture of fame and money. Just that. There's much more to life than that, it seems, to me.
Were you always somebody who was drawn to, the comedic side of life, if you like?
No, I take things seriously, but I also have a good laugh, which is difficult in this business because people like to label you. And
but you're unlabelable, if that's such a word, isn't it?
I know, and I've been starving ever since. And this is my other theory, we're all like Russian dolls, We're all born and we're all come from a baby, we're all toddlers, we're all, children, teenagers, binge drinkers, whatever. These people don't go away,
Yeah, that's slightly scary and also slightly reassuring.
Well, I think so. I think people ought to be helped to be more at home with themselves. That's why I've got this rather silly movement going called Ego Warriors, because, individuals need encouragement to feel all right as an individual.
Yeah.
And we don't get a lot of that, So, the Ego Warrior salute is the age-old gesture of derision and defiance, thumbing your nose. And we do that in shows as well, and people get sworn in, and it's rather good. There's camaraderie there.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as you said that to me, I want to do it across the airwaves to you and everyone listening.
Janice, it's tremendous radio. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Way.
Hey.
Yeah, it's good. I feel better. I'm guessing the answer to this is probably no, but one could imagine a parallel career for you where you don't do the comic stuff. Could you imagine doing that and being in more of the straight group?
No,
absolutely not.
No. I mean, I think all the really great musicians I know who've made it as famous, straight, serious, they've all got a terrific sense of humour. Eric Clapton used to say, "God, I envy you guys. I've always wanted to go on stage with a stuffed parrot on my shoulder." But you can't, not when you're going around with a poster with a perm and a slogan saying "Clapton is God." You can't do it.
Right, so you never wanted to be Robert Plant or anything, or Neil Young?
No, but I mean, if you think about it, William Shakespeare wrote comedies and dramas. And I think we as people have a complete emotional range, and we should be true to. I joke, I'm like Shakespeare, I do comedy and drama, but it's just with better songs.
Here's Arthur Smith.
His rivals were not enemies, but they were friends. He worked with so many different bands and collaborations, it's quite ridiculous. Obviously there was the Bonzos and the Ruttles, and he also performed with the Liverpool Poets in Grimm's. So I've made a little list of them here, there's so many. He was with Fatso, with John Halsey, He toured his one-man shows around the UK and across America with J.J. Jones and Tom Fry. Then he was also in the Bootleg Beatles. Oh yeah, and when the band Yola Tango were in town, or he was in America, he used to go and play with them. He was in The World, he was in Spand. I mean, he wasn't actually in the Rolling Stones. It wouldn't surprise me if it turned out that he did once do a gig with them. And he was in the Idiot Bastard Band with Roland Rivron, Adrian Edmondson and Phil Jupitus. He just liked working with other people, and I'm pretty sure it's fair to say everyone liked working with him. In fact, I spoke to Adrian Edmondson and Phil Jupitus about what fun it was to work with him on 4 Extras Comedy Club.
We got together with Neil and Raw Sex.
A number of extraordinarily heavy wine-consuming lunches.
Yeah, there's a lot of planning.
Rehearsals they're called, I think you'll find.
This was rehearsals without instruments.
Yeah, workshopping. I mean, they were singing.
Let's have a small raise a glass too to Neil Innes. It's hard not to be a bit in love with Neil Innes when you meet him, isn't it?
He's the genius that sort of joins together a lot of comics, I think. You know.
Yeah. Are you actually living the dream, Phil?
I kind of am, really, because this is...
You've managed to buy quite a lot of equipment,
Which of you two has got the most equipment?
Edmondson's got the most. He's got a trumpet.
I've got 2.
Here's Stephen Fry talking to Neil in 2016.
How long would you say were you in your pomp?
48 minutes.
You had a terrifically successful career as an individual with the Innes Book of Records and
I was
on
lucky
stage.
to be able to do what I liked.
With the Grimms, was it?
Grimms as well, yeah. And it cross-fertilised, of course, with they hate being called the Mersey poets.
Yeah,
but they are. It was wonderful because I never really taken much interest in poetry till I heard them reading their poems.
Yeah.
And Brian has done some of them, and Rogers,
Patton,
and Adrian Henry, of course.
Yeah.
And it was a lovely collection.
Yvonne Innes.
That was amazing, the poets, and we went up to Edinburgh to do the Edinburgh Festival with Grimms, and they all sat on the stage together, and each one would then get up and do their bit and sit down again, and Neil played the piano, and it was just such a lovely way of working, and that was another thing that Neil really loved. Everyone in Grimms was such a talent. It was just such a privilege to be with them. Roger and Brian's poetry and the way they read them was just amazing.
Stephen Fry again.
The Grimms, I think that's where I first heard the Idiot song, which you did.
That's right.
You're such a pedant, you've got as much imagination as a dead ant.
Yes. That came about, I was coming back from a gig in Nottingham, and I was in the lift with Mike McCartney, going up, and we got into a crowded lift full of young men in evening dress and girls with ball gowns. We must have been a Hunt Ball or something. And as the lift is going up, and I was, not wearing anything particularly outrageous, but it was sort of silly enough. And one of them said to me, "Excuse me, what's it like going around looking like an idiot?" And
that must have delighted you.
And I didn't know what to say except something very rude. And
I can take this duck off my head. You can't.
Yes, exactly. Tomorrow I will be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I thought about afterwards, well, what's wrong with being an idiot,
It means individual in Greek, after all.
I thought it might.
It's an idiolect and idiosyncratic.
Yeah. But I suddenly thought, Winnie the Pooh hum came into my head, like How Sweet to Be a Cloud, How Sweet to Be an Idiot.
Yes.
And on the next day I was on the bus writing How Sweet to Be an Idiot, harmless as a cloud, and then behind me was Brian Patton, and he sort of said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm working on this." I handed him the book, and he read it, and he went, and I'd written the next verse, How Sweet to Be an Idiot, blank, and dip my brain in joy.
My brain in joy.
Thank you, Brian.
Wow.
I was off.
And the one which I always use, if it arises, which is, you've got as much imagination as a caravan site.
Yes. Well, I now live near a caravan site.
So you know that you were right.
Yes, absolutely.
I ought to explain that, when I performed that song, I used to have a sort of yellow duck on my head. That was a hangover from the Bonzo days when I wanted to be a superhero called Alias Normal Man. And I had all the kit, the tights and the wellies and the outside underpants and the cape.
but nothing to finish it off. And I was in Woolworths, and I saw this line of big plastic yellow ducks called quacksies. And for some reason I thought, if I cut the wheels off, it'll make a hat.
Yeah.
So this turned out to be the sort of trademark.
Here's Arthur Smith.
I saw him when I was at university. I'm not quite sure which of the various bands he was in then, but I saw him perform How Sweet to Be an Idiot, which I thought was just the most beautiful, charming, empathetic song, a lovely lyric, but also kind of funny and gentle, which is exactly what Neil Innes was like, really. And he remains an inspiration. He was a one-off, a musician, a poet, a lyricist, an actor, and in the end, a very gentle, generous, loving man.
This is Neil Innes' Dip My Brain in Joy. I'm Diane Morgan, my producer is Laura Grimshaw, and we both have ducks on our heads. That was part 2, Ego Warrior. Still to come.
At 54 years of Neil, I was incredibly lucky.
If it's not fun, we're doing something wrong.
Oh, we haven't been staying away so much as not coming here.
Well, I thought that's the price of silliness.
Can I take a breath now? And part 3 is next week at the same time.
BBC Radio 4 Extra.
That isn't funny.
This is BBC Radio 4 Extra at 12 o'clock with Chris Barrow. Still to come, Fred's Pie Stall, which has stood in Cheam Square for 60 years, is threatened with closure by the council. That is until the lad decides to save it in Hancock's Half Hour. At 12:30, Prunella Scales and Joan Sanderson star in After Henry, the sitcom about 3 generations.
How sweet to be an idiot, as harmless as a cloud, too small to hide the sun, almost poking fun.
How Sweet to Be an Idiot by Neil Innes, performed with a duck on his head at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane as part of the Monty Python live show. You're listening to Neil Innes' Dip My Brain in Joy.
And dip my brain in joy.
This is part 3, Ouch. The first 2 parts of our adventure are available now on BBC Sounds. We're celebrating the life, work and absurdist tendencies of Neil Innes in this collage of archive interviews, performances and conversations with family, friends and fans, including his wife Yvonne, bandmates Phil Jackson, Ken Thornton, John Halsey, better known to Ruttles fans as Barry Wham, and Michael Palin.
He was just so good at everything he did, and what he did was so charming. No one could listen to Neil or watch Neil without a smile breaking out.
If it's not fun, we're doing something wrong.
The links he made between things and the way he thought was astonishing.
He had a prolific and diverse solo career that spanned touring with bands and one-man shows, acting, writing, songwriting, composing, producing, and a foray into children's television. He linked 2 of the most influential British cultural icons of the 1960s, the Beatles and the Pythons. He was part of the Bonzos, the Ruttles, occasionally known as the 7th Python, and regularly found with a duck on his head. He wrote and performed in his own BBC TV series Innes Book of Records, and in Rutland Weekend Television with Eric Idle. And on top of being comedically and musically gifted, he was also one of the nicest people you could hope to spend time with. A man full of professionalism and experience and stories, but no ego or entitlement. How could you be after spending that long with a duck on your head?
To be an idiot.
Neil died on Sunday, 29th of December 2019. He was 75. At the time of his death, he was working on a new album, and you'll hear some unreleased songs that have never been broadcast. But before we get to the end, let's tackle that much-used moniker of Neil's, the 7th Python. Here's Michael Palin.
How Sweet to Be an Idiot was really one of the great star moments of the Python tours. We took Neil with us on tour, partly because we liked him, but also he shared our humour. We'd have a little sort of interlude where we could change out of our city costumes into another city costume while Neil sang. Now, How Sweet to Be an Idiot always brought the house down. It was absolutely terrific. We all heard it, and the audience went wild, you know. It was a Python show, but it was a non-Python that stole the show. Very early on, Neil used to do the warm-up for the Python shows in the studio. That would be 1969, I suppose. And then we realised he was far too good, and it was a very difficult act to follow. He'd say, all right, we're ready for the next sketch. And Neil would stop, and the audience would say, oh, more, please, Neil. Because John decided not to appear in the last series, we needed all the help we could get. And Neil was, by that time, was the seventh Python, along with Carol Cleveland. So it wasn't like looking for someone outside the group. Douglas Adams was around at that writing bit. And Neil was very generous. He never sort of insisted on wanting his own material done his way. He was a good cooperator with others. He had no sort of ego about his own writing, so long as it fitted in and helped others. So that was great. I mean, that was a great thing about him, and really was actually the way Python worked. Although, lots of sort of egos in Python, everybody was aware of the importance of each member of the team. Neil was one of the few who really got Python. Neil quietly understood all the dynamics of the Python group, which were quite complex, and managed to get on with everybody. And I think it's true to say that all the Pythons loved Neil. He was a very lovable character. He did have a sort of sweet gentleness, which was very, very appealing. He's slightly outside the angry, competitive world of pop and entertainment generally, and clearly has some nice, eccentric ideas.
In 2009, Radio 2 broadcast a series celebrating all of the audio joys that the Monty Python team provided, which Neil was an integral part of. This is Monty Python's Wonderful World of Sound.
The thing was to talk about doing an album, and we'd written some songs, and I said, well, what sort of songs, And Eric said, well, Michael's written this thing about agrarian reform in the Middle Ages. Oh, good, that's right, get in there before Motown. And John, who's always to the point, said, well, what sort of music do you think for that, Neil? And I said, reggae? We happily made some albums, and then they decided to go touring, and it was quite convenient for me to come in and do a little musical skit or something, while, there was a bit of costume changing and rearranging. And so it was almost unplanned, really, but I found myself kind of seconded to Python for the next 10 years, Here am I, convincingly walking on the spot, just outside the stage door of Drury Lane, and yes, gasp, here we are at last, and let's go inside. Oh! We had 4 weeks, we were only supposed to do 2, we ended up doing 4, and by the end of term, sort of pranks were rife. And because it was 1974 and there had been 2 elections, it was the Resurrect the Election sketch, the silly election sketch, and it was sort of set up like election night, and Cleese was sort of anchorman, and then you'd have various people saying, and I had to play the part of Kevin Phillips Bong, and someone else would say silly party, and come out, and Eric would interview me and sort of say, well, how do you feel about your defeat? And I just have to say, well, I'm not at all downhearted, as I always say, try again, But the awful thing about having to do that meaningless line was I had to have a quick change and put on a raincoat, bowler hat, glued-on moustache, and frogman's flippers. It was the frogman's flippers and the panic of getting out there in time for Kevin Phillips Bong, silly party. Oh, you were at all downhearted by your defeat, and then I thought last night, I looked Eric in the eye, I said, no, I'm not at all downhearted. As I always say, try again. I looked him in the eye and took the microphone off him and started flapping my way to the front of the stage saying, climb every mountain, ford every stream.
Follow every byway till you find your dream. A dream that will last. All the love you can give every day of your life. For as long as you live. All together now. Climb every mountain. Ford every stream.
A very brave Kevin Phillips Bong there.
It was funny and people laughed, and but they decided to keep it on the album. EMI came after them. They hit them for £90,000. I mean, I did 3 or 4 full songs. I got nothing like that kind of money.
Michael Palin again.
That was wonderful, because he was like that. He would suddenly decide it was getting a bit dull and he wanted to up the ante and make it silly again. It cost us a huge amount when it went out on the album because we hadn't cleared the rights. These boring people, sort of all they wanted to get the money. But when he was doing it, I remember backstage we were absolutely... I was entranced because he was just going on, and he said, "You've got to stop now, Neil." And then when's another verse, and then another chorus. Oh, absolutely howlingly wonderful moment. It did cost us a lot, which I didn't mind at all. I thought that's the price of silliness. He had wonderful lines and phrases. There's one which I always use, which is, "I've suffered for my music. Now it's your turn." It's wonderful. It's just a wonderful debunker of sort of intellectual pretension of any kind. It's a joy. Neil was very much in that spirit. That's why we got on so well, I think. One thing that united the Pythons was puncturing pomposity, even if it occurred within the Pythons. But we won't talk about that. Neil was great company, and we spent a lot of time on the road together. And I got on very well with Neil. I think because we were fairly similar. We were both quite silly and could laugh quite easily. Neither of us were particularly interested in making a name for ourselves. It was enjoying working with the group, and that meant spending a lot of evenings together on the road. Towards the end of an evening, after we'd done a show, we'd go to a hotel, we'd have a drink, and then the bar closed. But Neil wasn't put off by that. Neil was probably getting into his stride by that time. Something about Belgium or political views or whatever. He was suddenly become quite loquacious. And he would say, "Let's have another drink." I said, "Well, the bar's closed." There's always a night porter in these hotels. So Neil would go off and he'd find somebody in a little cubicle at the back and say, "Excuse me, have you got any miniature scotches?" And so poor night porter had to look around and unlock something. In the medicine cupboard, he found a couple of bottles of Drambuie that had been there for 40 years. So in the end, I called Neil Night Porter Beta, because poor men, you knew that Neil would come in the evening, the night porter would have work to do. He'd have to look through his stock.
Neil performed a one-man show for BBC Radio Wales, which combined live performances of his songs with stories from his career. Stories of having a lovely time on tour with the Pythons.
Bear in mind that everyone had been used to the disciplines of television and filming, and going out and doing it live, night after night, all sorts of sort of hysteria set in. The first tour was called Monty Python's First Farewell Tour. And we went all around the UK and did things like that. And everyone knew every sketch, the parrot sketch, the argument sketch, the classic sketches. And in fact, Cleese one day said, "What do I say here?" And everyone shouted out the line. And then somebody said, "Well, why don't we take it to Canada?" So we went to Canada, and because there was a party of us, we did a deal with Air Canada. Well, somebody did a deal with Air Canada so that we all flew first class, which meant, sort of plane takes off, bing goes the seatbelt light, and bing goes, "You may smoke if you wish" light. It was that long ago. But whoever arranged the tour planned it in the kind of way that we went in the worst possible way across time zones. We didn't sort of go across. We went here, there, back there, and all back over there, Vancouver. And one morning we left Calgary at 8 o'clock in the morning, took off, bing, seatbelt, bing, smoking sign, stewardess, "Would you care for a drink, sir?" I said, "Well, steady on, it's a bit early, isn't it?" She said, "It's 11:30 in Winnipeg." "All right, I'll have a gin and tonic." So I had a gin and tonic, it was flying along, and Canada is enormous, it's like a patchwork quilt of prairie, In fact, we were coming down once, landing at Edmonton, home of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Graham was looking out the window and said, "Why there? Could easily be 100 yards to the left." Anyway, we're going on our way to Winnipeg. Couple of gin and tonics inside me, and all of a sudden the captain's voice comes over the intercom. "Would Passenger Thompson kindly make himself known to the cabin crew?" So I thought, well, why not? I'd seen Spartacus. So I leapt out and said, "I'm Passenger Thompson."
And it would have fallen pretty flat. Had not, Graham Chapman had precisely the same idea at exactly the same time. So the two of us are up, I'm Pastor Thompson, you know, and then Michael Pellingham, I'm Pastor Thompson. So Air Canada were glad to see the back of us. And you see, that's how I lost my duck, you see. I don't think they lost the suitcase, you know, I think they actually stole the duck. I do. But anyway, we're always getting stick from, you know, the wordy ones, you know. And, I mean, Cleese was always, you know, teasing Gilliam about the fact he couldn't speak English. So, what exactly do you mean when you say a bunch of water? But anyway, I started to get paranoid because every time, you know, anything substantial was catapulted off a fort or castle, like a cow or a giant wooden rabbit, it landed on me. But anyway, I did get to play the part of the obnoxious minstrel. It perplexes me now, even today, to think that some of the finest brains of Oxford and Cambridge came up with these lyrics. Bravely bold Sir Robin rode forth from Camelot. He was not afraid to die, oh brave Sir Robin. He was not at all afraid to be killed in nasty ways. Brave, 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 brave Sir Robin. He was not in the least bit scared to be mashed into a pulp, or to have his eyes gouged out and his elbows broken, to have his kneecap split and his body burnt away, and his limbs all hacked and mangled, brave Sir Robin. His head smashed in and his heart cut out and his liver removed and his bowels unplugged and his nostril draped and his bottom burned off and his penis went in the mind.
Well, Neil has brought us neatly round to the Python films. He appeared in Monty Python and the Holy Grail and Monty Python's Life of Brian. Oh, look, it's Michael Palin again.
Because he had a rather sweet and innocent look, and he had a wonderful, easily hurt look. He seemed to get the roles to go with it. There were a whole series of appearances in Python films where he got hit. It was Neil in the Holy Grail, on whom the wooden killer rabbit cracked. It was the moment before he got hit that was so wonderful. Neil could do this wonderful expression of somebody enjoying, and the moment he was hit, the face sort of collapsed. He fought back in The Life of Brian. One of my favourite performances was the Samaritan fighting the huge gladiator and running away. and eventually tiring the gladiator out by running away, and the gladiator collapses. It was just wonderful, the expression on Neil's face. Neil was a very good actor. He could play all sorts of characters really very well, even though he did drop huge rabbits on him.
You're listening to Neil Innes' Dip My Brain in Joy on BBC Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds, and I'm your host, Diane Morgan. Perhaps Neil's finest acting turn was as Ron Nasty in the Ruttles. Let's go back to where it all started. Rutland Weekend Television, the BBC Two sketch show, which ran for 2 series from 1975, with sketches by Eric Idle and music by Neil. Here's the producer, Ian Keel.
The basis for the series would be a clapped-out television station. Eric suggested, I'll write the sketches and we'll have Neil Innes doing 2 or 3 songs in every show. He then said, how about a little repertory of players? Those included David Batley, Henry Wolfe, Gwen Taylor, Terry Baylor, and occasionally Wanda Ventham and Timothy Carlton. We agreed that Neil would, in addition to doing the songs, would play quite a lot of the parts, which he did very well. So he was an actor as well as a singer, I discovered. Eric and Neil were amazingly talented and had extraordinarily good concentration, but they were very different in the way they approached the work. The studio production was in the hands of my colleague Andrew Gosling, and I did all the filmed excerpts, but I was the producer of the whole thing. I really quite liked doing the Tunbridge Wells song. It did work a treat.
3 typical singing and dancing, laughing and clowning American sailors who have 24 hours liberty in one of the most exciting towns in Kent, Tunbridge Wells.
The most exciting place in the world for sailors.
With the most exciting, wicked, naughty gals. More exciting than a book of Norman Mailers.
That's Tunbridge Wells. We're on our way to Tunbridge Wells.
Wells. We spend all day in Tunbridge Wells and smell all the Tunbridge Wells smells. Where the women are women and the men are rougher and tougher than the worst of hells. There Tunbridge, Tunbridge, Tunbridge Wells.
And it went into a dance routine with Gillian Gregory, the choreographer. She was one of the 3 sailors, which was very nice. And I'd met her doing Ken Russell's Tommy film. She was extremely sympathetic to what was going on. And it was also very good with Neil and Eric. Their concentration was so good, they immediately picked up all the steps.
Oh, we've been to Lamington. We've been to Malvern, and we've been to Cheltenham with all of the swells, but the place we dig the most in the world is Tunbridge Wells.
On closing day, nothing to do and nothing to say. Gonna shout out hip hooray, I got 24 hours in Tunbridge Wells to while away.
We had a Christmas special with George Harrison as a pirate.
The moment you've all been waiting for, Mr. George Harrison sings.
I remember George Harrison was extremely nervous and he wanted to do it because he liked the show, but he needed a lot of reassuring, which I thought was absolutely extraordinary.
A pirate's life for me. All my friends are pirates and they sing the BBC. I got a jolly Roger, it's a black and white and fast. So get out of your skull and crossbones and I run it up your mast.
I loved the sketch Sprimpo. The leading character had problems of continuity, and every single shot, he walked out of one shot wearing one costume and walked into another wearing another costume. But there was a disturbing moment when the costume lady said to me, "We have spent the costume money." I said, "What, the costume money for all the filming?" She said, "No, for all the series." I had to go cap in hand to the department that issues all the money and make a special plea.
Hello, I bet you're wondering why we're here, sitting on our bums without a stitch of gear. Well, as it happens, our budget has expired and everything's gone back to the place from whence it's hired. And so, although you know we never bitch, there's not a single funny set we haven't got a stitch, for we've overspent our budget, good not half. Now there's nothing left to spend to make you laugh.
Producer Ian Keel, accompanied by assorted sketches starring Neil Innes and Eric Idle, and some bloke called George Harrison, from BBC Two's Rutland Weekend Television. The series was the birthplace of a pitch-perfect pastiche, the musical legend that will last a lunchtime, the Ruttles. His drummer extraordinaire, John Halsey.
Neil and I have worked together since about 1972. I joined this band and we called ourselves Fatso because we were all struggled with our weight. And it was a really good band. And Neil phoned up one day and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm not doing anything." I said, "Oh, right." And he used to moan when he wasn't doing anything. And he used to moan when he was doing something. And then the next gig we did, and got up and suddenly we were Neil Innes and Fatso. And then eventually Neil invited us to go and do the music for Rutland Weekend Television. One week he wrote a song, which was a Beatles song, "I Must Be in Love." And he always called it a list song. Am I rich? Am I poor? I'm in doubt. I'm not sure. Eric said we ought to film this and make it like a Dick Lester black and white movie. And then, of course, the rest is history. Eric took the film over to Saturday Night Live and it was shown and got an incredible reaction. Lorne Michaels, who owns Saturday Night Live, said, right, let's do a film, The Rise to Fame of the Ruttles, that parallels the rise to fame of the Beatles. Can I take a breath now?
I'll let Neil take up the story.
Things were afoot across the great Atlantic. Somebody in America was offering, this is true, $20 million for the Beatles to get back together again. So Saturday Night Live, the sort of satirical program produced by Lorne Michaels, with sort of all the people that have been through it, like Steve Martin, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, a list of wonderful performers who went on to great things afterwards. They were all working on this show, and Lorne Michaels thought this is a good gag to run with. He got George Harrison to come on the show, and he got $3,000 in a wad, and stood there with George saying, all this could be yours, George. All you have to do is get the guys together and play. And George is saying, well, all of that for me? And he said, well, no, not all of it for you. You have to share it with the others. But you needn't tell Ringo, That kind of joke was going on. And, of course, every show had a host. And Eric, being a star of Monty Python, he was invited to sort of, host the show and run with this gag a bit. And Lorne came on again and said, well, we have Eric Idle as the host for the show. He's with a group called Monty Python. And, well, more importantly, he's on the show as a host because he said he could get the Beatles together for $300. Well, rather unwisely, we gave him the money. Time went by and we were getting a little anxious, and we called England and he said, how's it going, Eric? And he said, yeah, it's fine, everything's under control. But apparently it wasn't a good telephone line because, in fact, he hasn't got the Beatles, he's got the Ruttles. And they showed the Ruttle clip on Saturday Night Live. And the response was enormous. People wrote in saying, we love the Ruttles, and sending in Beatles albums with Beatles crossed out, Ruttles written over it. And then people said, what have we got here? What on earth is going on? But, it was so huge at the time, the Beatles story. Everybody knew it in 1978 it was. And so they started saying, well, let's do the whole story. All you need is cash. The story of the Prefab Four. I was like, yeah, it's a great idea, and I'm sat there, and suddenly they all look around at me, and they're saying, well, how about it, Neil? You reckon you can come up with 20 more Ruttle songs by next Thursday lunch? So anyway, here's some of the ones I did. People were proud in Double Back Alley. Neighbours were loud.
Here's Neil's wife of over 50 years, Yvonne Innes, who witnessed Neil's creative endeavours firsthand, or at least witnessed how he would fully immerse himself in his work.
When Neil wrote the Ruttles, he went into the studio and I didn't see him for a couple of days. When he came back, he had all these songs. And I thought that was amazing because we were at college when the Beatles started. And that's what he was writing to. The feel, that's what he was trying to find, the feel of what he remembered.
Neil worked with his trusted friends, the musical arranger John Altman and the studio engineer Steve James, to orchestrate the Ruttles songs to achieve that authentic, Beatley sound. John Altman.
He contacted me and said, what we want to do is basically an overview of the Beatles. And what people tend to forget is they'd only split up 7 or 8 years before. So the story was current. It wasn't like stretching back in time to cover a history. The other advantage then, of course, was being able to call on the pool of players who'd actually played on the Beatles records. So, for example, my cellists on the psychedelic Beatles tracks, if you like, had played cello on Beatles songs. And one of them said, oh, Freddie Alexander and Brian Martin used to play cello, the main cellists on the Beatles things. And they had this way of going from one note to the other. And he did a sort of portamento down from the string. And as soon as he did it, it was the Beatles sound. And they attacked the cello in the way that the players attacked it on the Beatles records, which is why it sounds so authentic. Neil always said that he never went back to individual tracks, but used his memories of what he was doing when he heard a certain Beatles number. I did listen to Beatles tracks, and I noticed certain things happening in late Beatles tracks. For example, a flute might pop up in Penny Lane for 2 bars and then disappear. So I put a flute in and 2 bars and off it went. What we always tried to do, and why I think Neil and I had such a good relationship, was our parodies were always affectionate. They were parodies, but they weren't send-ups. So they had a longer life than, say, if not the 9 o'clock news did ABBA. Everyone would laugh at it, but you wouldn't think, oh, that was such a great song, I really want to hear it again. The thing about Neil's parodies were they stood up in their own right as great songs. And of course we had George Harrison in the background who would say, that sounds good, not sure about that, do this, do that. A great judge. I know George was very pleased. I wasn't sure about whether George Martin was very pleased. But a few years later, I was introduced to him by a mutual friend who said, I don't know if you know John Altman. And George Martin looked at me and said, I know John Altman. The recording was really basically done in one day from my angle. We went in with the strings and the brass, and we did the lot with Steve James engineering.
He said, we're doing a thing called the Ruttles, and we got to cover 7 years in 3 weeks.
Steve James.
They came with some demos, and I basically pushed buttons and put microphones up in front of these incredible musicians. Ollie Halsall, who was an absolute freak. John Halsey was lovely and also amazing player. Ricky Fattar, who wasn't supposed to be there because he didn't have a visa. We can say this now, it doesn't matter. Andy Brown, who's the bass player, who doesn't get enough of a shout, to be honest with you. Mostly what I remember is the pub after the session, which were hysterically funny because Ollie was a very naughty boy. We were all quite naughty, but Ollie was particularly naughty. I pushed the record button and they just started playing this stuff, and then I had to make it sound like the Beatles. I worked for EMI for 3 years beforehand, so I knew their catalogue backwards. We laid all the backing tracks down, and then John Altman, bless him, came in and did all the orchestration after that, one track after another. We'd covered everything so quickly. Everything seemed to flow really well. We did it all in 3 weeks, and then we had to remix it twice, once for TV, because in those days it had to be in mono, and then I had to mix it again for the album. The main problem we had was making it sound like it was done in the 60s. It was too fidelity. It was recorded too well. I'm a knob twiddler, and I was playing around with tape machines from the age of 10. I had no problem playing around with tapes and turning them upside down, and so we distorted it and compressed it. And I remember mixing some of it to 7.5 IPS, which is very slow. So you actually get more tape distortion that way. And we did do it in 3 weeks. The mixing took a little bit longer, but all the recording was done pretty bloody quickly. Because I was working with incredible players, when it comes to making any record with anybody, when it happens like that, you can feel it in the recording. When everyone's focused and it all works, it happens, you know. And that record happens, and it's a classic record, I think. The tracks I remember really enjoying doing was Piggy in the Middle. I love doing that. That was a beauty. I still remember the lyrics to all these songs, particularly Piggy in the Middle, because the first line of Piggy in the Middle is still, in my opinion, one of the best lyrics ever written. I know you know what you know, but you should know by now that you're not me. I remember falling off the chair while he was doing that. Double Back Alley was another one that I really loved. Cheese and Onions. They're incredible songs, and he's an incredibly clever man, but also the vibe in the studio was amazing. He was just so lovely. I mean, he knew what he wanted, but he was so lovely to work with, and we got on very well. You can't ask for more than that, really. It's trust, and he trusted me, and that trust continued for the next 35 years.
Here's that there Barry Wom again.
So clever, really, really clever. Neil used to say, let's record it Liverpudlian. We went into a studio in Hendon for a week of evenings and recorded all these songs as demos. Because when Wimbledon was on, we kept breaking to go down the pub, not because we were alcoholics or even thirsty, just to catch up with Wimbledon. Some of the stuff we did at Hendon was used in the film and on the album for like what's meant to be really early Ruttles in the hamburger days. When it was decided about the filming, originally Eric was going to be the presenter, the guy with the raincoat and the glasses, the Alan Wicker type. We did like a thing in a studio where we played and tried to act like the Beatles, and it was decided that Eric should be in the film a lot more. He was the name they were going to try and sell the film on, and so he was going to play the Paul McCartney character. But I did get the drumming part. Why? I don't know, simply because I was on the album, probably. And if I had to mime, I could mime to my own drumming, which is always a lot easier. The making of the film was, for me, really exciting. I'd never done anything like it. Never done anything like it since either. I mean, filming part of it lasted for about 3 weeks, and it was every day. And it was really exciting. I couldn't wait to get picked up in the taxi and taken off and put on the costumes. And a lot of it was ad-libbed. Eric kept saying to me, you know, you're doing really well. Like, keep it up. It's really, really good. When I saw it, all the stuff I had lived wasn't used. So it was a bloody waste of time, really.
It must have been a great honour meeting the Queen.
Yeah, it must have been.
What did she ask you?
She asked us who we were.
And what did you say?
I said I was him. I felt more like him than me.
Do you feel better after seeing the Queen?
No, you feel better after seeing the Doctor. Not my doctor, you don't. Not your doctor.
The week before the Ruttles film All You Need Is Cash received its premiere on BBC television in March 1978, Eric Idle and Neil Innes were interviewed by John Tobler for BBC Radio 1's Rock On, and Dirk McQuickley and Ron Nasty made a rare appearance in the wild.
The Ruttles, Cheese and Onions, and if you were around in the late 60s, you remember that one very well. Well, Dirk and Nasty have finally, with the film of their careers coming up shortly, agreed to talk to Rock On. Dirk, first of all, there have been a lot of rumours over the years about the possibility of this remarkable Ruttles reunion. Do you think there's any chance of it at all?
Well, no, really. Yes and no. No, not really, no, because, you know, the thing is, I feel like the Ruttles are dead, you know. It's been at least 7 or 8 years since we were Ruttles, and it's like different people, really, you know. You can't go back, except in the BBC.
Nasty, I wonder, can I call you Ron?
No.
Oh, well, it's certainly a great pleasure, finally, to get some sort of interview with you, because really we've been chasing you for years now. And what has made you decide to come out of hiding on this occasion?
I think you were just lucky. In fact, I wasn't paying much attention when you got hold of me. I thought you were someone else.
You and Dirk were principally the writers in the Ruttles.
Yeah, well, we had pens. Times were hard when we started, you know.
Well, it's certainly a much smaller world in a sense than it was in 1963, and it's often said that rock music is perhaps the biggest force or potential force for good in the world today.
Well, there's lots of people got, you know, things to say about rock, you know, and they're usually the people who've got a magazine to get out every week. You know, they have to say something. You know, and as for the world getting smaller, it probably has, you know. It's like a big lollipop or something.
The Ruttles, the band that was and wasn't, that is and yet isn't, the band that sounds suspiciously like another group of four known as the Beatles. Well, at last it can be revealed that the Ruttles are a creation of Eric Idle and Neil Innes, currently taking a slightly wicked look at the rock mania of the 60s, with an album and television special to be shown on BBC Two this Easter Monday. Dividing the blame, and we have to do it, Eric Idle was responsible for the script and Neil Innes for the music. What was the first move then, to write the script or work on the songs? Well,
the initial move was, I wrote a synopsis in New York and gave it to NBC, and they said, fine, go ahead. And then Neil set to work and wrote about 26, I think, Rutles songs. 30 Rutles songs. 2 of which were okay, you know. Yeah.
30?
He doesn't hang about.
Well,
lots to do in Lewisham at night.
I'd imagine that putting it together, writing the songs, was a bit more difficult than just writing one-off songs, wasn't it?
Well, it was strange because I thought, if I go and listen to all the Beatles records I've got, you know, I'm going to be influenced by the actual tune. So I just worked from memory, really. I thought, well, that was a certain period, and that was a certain period, and wrote that way, and then we rehearsed them up, and then we came to record them. Then we listened to the albums to see the production, really. They were very good. They were. I mean, I'd never listened to Beatles records like that before. I mean, you just had so many different ideas going on at the time, you know. Fantastic inventors. I don't think there's anybody to touch them in terms of, you know, Yeah, you do get the feeling when you study it that the reason they went so well is because they were just much better than anybody else. I mean, they were
absolutely brilliant. Yeah. The thing was, when we came to actually record them, and play them, everybody knew what to do because they were so familiar with Beatles stuff. It's the same with making the film too. I mean, everybody liked the wardrobe and the makeup. Everybody really got into it. Everybody enjoyed it. So it was always a good project to work on because people really liked it. It was good fun. It's a kind of parody of documentaries about musicology and people take things too seriously. They do. They really sort of like, if anybody does something good, they want to know why it's done or how it's done. Or it's sort of like, that's just good. Just watch it. Yeah, enjoy. Live for the day.
Here's Michael Palin. He appeared in the film as the chairman of the Rutles Corps alongside George Harrison. And as a Beatles fan himself, he was delighted to be involved.
It clearly was a sort of combination of Eric and Neil. Neil was able to just conjure things up out of nowhere. And I think Eric really needed Neil in there to get the musical parody right. And it was spot on. It was absolutely excellent. And it was loving parody too. It wasn't look at me, aren't I being clever. It was just a joyful sort of other Beatles, really. I thought it was a terrific piece of work. The tone of it is just right. And also it shows, I think, that Neil was a very confident performer. I mean, he had this sort of diffidence about things. And yet when he's on song and when he's really doing something like playing Lennon in the Ruttles, he's very strong. He gets Lennon's strength there in the singing and the performance, a token of his acting.
Some people say you've been staying away from Liverpool, now you're famous.
Oh, we haven't been staying away so much as not coming here.
Some people say it's 6 months since you came back here.
Well, that's just the sort of thing some people would say.
Nevertheless, it has been 6 months.
Now you're saying it, why don't you ask me where I've been?
Where have you been?
I'm not telling you.
Very, very good. And I was really pleased to play a part in it and find yourself being interviewed by someone played by George Harrison, One has to remember these were gods when we were young. He didn't exist, really. And there is George Harrison standing there, the physical, and he's going to interview me, and I'm going to play one of his great friends and all that. It did seem weird, but there was such a nice feeling about that film. And George, of course, was great and funny and ironic and warm and interested. It was the start of quite a long friendship.
There have been continued allegations that Rutles Corps is going bankrupt. Eric Manchester, the Ruttles press agent, are these allegations true?
No, they're conjecture, They're sort of rumour. I think you find that where you get success, you'll always find this sort of rumour. No.
So the stories of the theft, they're not true also?
No, they're greatly exaggerated, It's bad, Things are going. But nothing like the rate that people indicate. The trouble is that people feel that because these boys are the Ruttles, people can come in and just help themselves to whatever they want. And this is just not on. And we're putting a stop to this, and we are doing, it's almost dried up. Things have gone. I won't deny it. Television sets, the odd car belonging to the company has disappeared, but it's not extreme, Although I did come in once and find that my office had been nicked.
In the 1990s, the Beatles released a collection of never-before-released material called Anthology. And wherever the Beatles go, so the Ruttles must too. Though Neil was a little reticent, producer Martin Lewis tells the story.
With all this interest in the Beatles, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to do something with the Ruttles. And he laughed and he said, well, I don't want to be seen to be over-exploiting the idea. I said, over-exploiting it? You did it in 1978. I mean, here we're in 1995. It's not going to be over-exploiting. Neil does not like to jump into things. He tends to cogitate. And he then went off famously to go and see George at his home in Henley. And George said, of course you should do it. It's all part of the soup. Meaning that he felt that the Ruttles was part of the Beatles story. And with that blessing, that was what Neil was waiting for. And he phoned me back and said, OK, I'm in. And then Neil went to work. Neil said, would it be acceptable if I repurposed some existing songs that he had written and used in other projects? But if it's a song you've written and you're repurposing it for the Ruttles, why not? You'll Ruttleize it. The majority of the songs on the album were new songs, but there were definitely about 3 or 4, such as Shangri-La, Questionnaire, Joe Public, and Nico Elastic King. These were all songs that had been in the Guinness Book of Records or on a solo album. What a wonderful insight it is into the gifts of Neil to play the original versions of those songs. He performed Shangri-La on the Frankie Howard show, and the gift of Neil was that he could take his own composition and understand how that needed to be refocused through the audio prism of the Beatles, and it came out as a Rutles song.
The Ruttles, in the form of Neil, John Halsey and Ricky Fattar, were back together in the studio. Here's John Halsey again.
Neil asked me to come and do the album. He said Ricky was coming across the Atlantic to do the album, and John Altman was involved again to do the musical direction. And Ricky played drums on most of the album. I did a few tracks. I thought it was a fantastic album, and I remember thinking at the time, this is probably the best album I've ever been involved with. I believed our own promotion.
And Neil got his own band back together as he once again joined forces with John Ottman and Steve James to orchestrate, produce and record the album.
I worked on both Ruttles albums, the Archaeology one in the 90s, but the songs that I'd done with him over the years that then became the second Ruttles album, I approached totally differently from the way I'd done them before. I'd done Shangri-La in his Book of Records, but then when I did it for the Ruttles, I didn't listen at all to the way we'd done it originally. There was no echo whatsoever of anything I'd done in the past with him.
Archaeology was a different experience.
Steve James.
Because there was a lot of politics involved with the record labels at the time. The songs were amazing. That was a great record. We got on great again. It was no issues. Everything just went really smoothly. It was fun to do, but it wasn't like making the first record. The first record was a life-changing experience.
Neil remained close to his musical creation that lived much longer than a lunchtime. 40 years after the film's release, Neil and John Halsey, together with a band of friends and fans, were still touring as the Ruttles to adoring audiences. Ruttles keyboardist Phil Jackson.
I was still in awe of Neil, and we were hired people that were huge fans of the Ruttles, and we really respected it. And we've obviously got the right amount of fun because we like it so much already. We'd all get in a van, classic tale, and we'd have a little gang of us, and it was like a little family. It was so nice. A single joy to be there all the time. All Neil ever really wanted to do was just be in a band. You know, he never wanted to be the front person. And I think the main thing is doing it for the right reason. We were rehearsing it, and he said, look, if it's not fun, we're doing something wrong. It was always fun because, especially with Neil and John, there's such a long history and chemistry between them that it was like a comedy act between them all the time. It was such fun, and it was just nice to be with nice people for 30 days of the year, having fun, and then playing to the happiest people. They know all the songs, they sing along, and they're just so happy to be there. And that's a real experience, that's a buzz, that is. And it's all because of Neil. Obviously, I've listened to pretty much all his music. His words are pretty incredible. I think he's the best songwriter ever. I really do. He does things that no one else has ever really done. He has such a balance of it being a good song, and you can really listen to it and get into it. But also, the words are clever and funny, but they're topical. He really made all his songs mean something.
Ruttles guitarist, Rutling Ken Thornton.
When it comes to the Ruttles, I knew certain things. I had it in my head. So when I did sit down to learn it all, it was pretty easy. I mean, it was already there. So when I did play those first times with Neil, because it was just us as a duo playing acoustically, I would play a lot of the keyboard bits too. And I remember during rehearsals for those first Ruttles gigs, Mickey said, Ken, do you mind if I play my own parts? Because we played most of both albums. And we also played a few solo things. We did I'm the Urban Spaceman with all of us playing kazoos. And it really started to feel more and more like a real band. Even if something went wrong, it would end up usually being some comic relief as well. And that was the thing. It was about having fun. I liked the shows best when you're kind of in a noisy club and you got everybody just like right in front of you. You can see them smiling and singing along, and they're all in the moment and they're being silly with you. The more they have fun, the more you have fun. And some nights were just amazing. One of the funnest ones was Glastonbury. We played in this huge tent. So it was like a couple thousand people in a tent, but you could see every single one of them. And as far as I could see, everybody was like smiling and laughing and singing along and dancing. It was just amazing. I can't imagine ever having more fun on stage than what we did with those guys.
Ruttles drummer John Halsey.
Ken used to arrive ready rehearsed. He knew all the songs. He used to have to remind Neil of the bloody songs. It was a great band. It was a really good show. We used to just enjoy ourselves so much, musically and all being together, really. Neil said to me in a quiet moment when there was just he and I in a dressing room once, "Do you know, this is the best band I've ever had."
In 2014, Neil spoke to Matt Everett on Six Music.
The Ruttles are they don't have a comfort zone in the music business. They're not real. So I'm always agreeably surprised that people get it. We existed because we were pretending the Beatles didn't exist. And it was a game that everybody played, like playing air guitar or being a caped hero or something. It was children in the sandpit. And we're going, la, 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 to the real world. We're going to play this. And George Harrison was totally behind it. And if anything, he realised that the hard, painful bits of the Beatle breakup were hard and painful, and it would be nice to find a funnier way of saying it, really, and the Ruttles did that, I think. So we knew that the Ruttles had to sort of do a job, and that was to tell the story as honestly as possible, but to sort of like take the pain out of it. The best of the Beatles was, their catalogue of fantastic songs they wrote, and the worst of it is all the screaming and the nonsense, because they were always a wonderful tight band. And funny guys, four funny guys who were screamed off the stage.
It was great just to think that the world's greatest band also kind of had the world's greatest comedy tribute band as well. Because I guess you exist in this place that is like, it's part acting, it's part comedy, it's part cinematic, it's all these things. Rock stars always want to be actors, and actors often want to be rock stars.
Oh,
so you kind of exist at the crossroads of all those different disciplines, I guess.
Yes, I mean, one man's polymath is another man's scatterbrain. And I don't have a brain, I have a box of frogs.
Neil died on Sunday, 29th of December 2019. He was 75. At the time of his death, he was working on a new album and on a project called Radio Noir. Part audio memoir, part experimental work of art, part exploration of the human brain, an attempt at herding his box of frogs.
If you can live for long enough on this planet, get to go around enough of it to see enough different ways of life, and keep enough of an open mind, you will eventually discover that enough is enough, and that nobody, absolutely no one, truly knows what is going on. Not a soul. Not even those who are supposed to know, especially the ones who say they know best. This is, of course, the exact opposite of what we are led to believe when we are young. When I look back on my life, I am astonished by how gullible and naive I could be. Not just once or twice, but again and again. I am clearly not alone. Words like gullible and naive, not to mention their everyday usage in any language, are living proof that taking advantage of innocence is common practice all over the world. We all go through it, growing up, learning the hard way, making the best of it, gathering information, forming opinions, educating the young, all without having the faintest idea as to why we are here, or how on earth we are supposed to deal with it. This alarming fact, or absence of actual fact, forms the bedrock of our relationships with one another, and is central to our ability to reason and make decisions. But what do we think we are doing? Who do we think we are? We all live alongside a great unknown. Each of us is in our own parallel universe, tuning in to what our brains tell us. Our brains tell us what we think and feel. And this is our problem. This is where it all goes wrong. Only we know what goes on inside us. Other people only see our outside. This is not a good system. We can only compare our insides with the outsides of others. We can only imagine what other people think and feel inside by looking at their outsides. We cannot see ourselves as others see us. We can only guess what other people think when they see our outsides. We are all alone together.
An extract from Neil's audio memoir called Radio Noir. Here's Neil's wife of over 50 years, Yvonne Innes.
Everybody was saying, you must write your biography because he had such a life and knew so many people and be wonderful to read. And the only way he would do it was with something like Radio Noir. So rather than the biography being, and then he did this, and then Neil could have made it funny and pithy and thoughtful and stuff. It would actually be a bit biographical. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. He was just on the verge, and I think that would have spurred him on to many other things. He was really at the height of his songwriting powers.
At the time of his death, he was also working on a new album, which will receive a posthumous release.
I used to think I could think things through. Now any notion I fancy will do. My lifetime's false is divided by true. Old age becomes me. So many memories to recall. Good times, bad times, big and small. Now like New England after the fall. Old age becomes me.
Yvonne Innes again.
Neil was really made up by the fact he could actually make the CD. And he got to work with Steve, who produced the first Ruttles album. So he went to Australia to make it. So Neil was working with people that he absolutely admired, really got on well with them. And we had a great time. Just went from good to better to best. Studio was delightful. Musicians were delightful. Australia was lovely, and it was great to be there. And I think that was a really happy experience. Neil and Steve got on so well the first time, and they hadn't changed.
That was a lovely, lovely record to make.
Steve James.
We hadn't worked together for nearly 10 years, and it was just like the old days, and we had a ball. It was brilliant. Local Brisbane, young Brisbane brass players, local Aussie musos. And the record's wonderful. We're just waiting for a release on that now, but it's sitting there waiting to go. And I've got little tidbits hiding on my drive, right there.
Yvonne Innes again.
We've got a big grand piano, and he used to sit and play often. He didn't actually compose though. He went into the studio to compose, but when he came out and played the piano, it's when things were nearly there. And the very last song on his album, Sitting Here, it's absolutely my favourite song. And it was written after he had been away on tour. Before he came back, I had to go to the UK. So all in all, we were away from each other for about 8 weeks, which was absolutely massive. And when I came back, he'd written this song, and it's so beautiful. And it's about being okay being on your own, but wanting all the time to be with the other person. And that was the last song. I mean, no, but that was the last song he wrote.
I don't mind just sitting here all by myself. By myself is all I need for now. All I need to know is in my memory. All I need to understand is how. Can anyone feel so alone? They don't know what to think. If I knew, I'd tell you in a heartbeat, in a blink. So here am I, and where are you? And what if I should say to you, my heart would break if ever you should leave me. Just sitting here all by myself. Just sitting here.
was sort of big outpourings of grief from just about everybody who knew Neil. It was just crazy, but lovely, because at least we felt we were all together. The shock was huge. I was incredibly lucky. I had 54 years of Neil. It cheers me up when I think of it like that. He was really, really bright. How he thought about the world and the links he made between things and the way he thought was astonishing to me as well, and yet I saw a lot of it. But he spent a lot of time thinking, which nobody does, except Neil did. He made that time because that's the whole part of what he was. He needed to know how he felt about things, so he would sit and think about it and work it all out. He enjoyed his life and he gave so much to people, and they gave it back to him in spades. He took everything from his life that he could get from it. He meant it.
Neil Innes, a hard-working and deeply creative man with a sense of fun and a sense of the absurd. Interesting and interested. He was a generous and gentle soul who tried to make a difference and improve the world through music, laughter and kindness, surrounded by a fame that he eschewed in favour of creating songs that searched for truth and searched for fun. The outpouring of love and respect for him from his colleagues and friends has been beautifully clear in the making of this programme. He was definitely one of the good ones. We'd like to thank Yvonne Innes and the Innes family, John Halsey, John Altman, Steve James, Ian Keel, Arthur Smith, Phil Jackson, Ken Thornton, Martin Lewis, Rick Wakeman, Stephen Fry, Adrian Edmondson, Kevin Eldon, Rodney Slater, Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin for their time and their stories over the years. You've been listening to Neil Innes, Dip My Brain in Joy with me, Diane Morgan. It was produced by Laura Grimshaw.